When did you see someone lose big and go nuts at a casino? I work in IT for a casino, and I just had to replace a phone that was ripped off the wall and thrown at one of our pit bosses over a bad loss. I've been a dealer for 10 years. Third day of dealing, fresh out of dealer school, I'm dealing Pai Gao tiles. This is like an Asian domino game. You try to get pairs and tiles to add up as close to 9 as possible, on a $25 minimum game. A guy is there consistently betting between 25 and 75 for a good 2 hours. He then slides his whole stack on one hand for $3,000. For those of you who know the game, he gets Tin Dai Bo. I pull Jijun. For those who don't know the game, it's like he got pocket kings and I got pocket aces. Or that he pulled a 20 in blackjack and I just pulled 11 cards to make 21. The odds are astronomical and it's the only hand that could beat him. He slams his fist on the table, swearing in Chinese, chips are flying everywhere, and he begins to shove his finger down his throat. He blows big chunks all over my game. I close the table and pit down for cleanup. That's my third day on the job. The money and benefits are great though. I highly recommend the industry. I made between $30 and $40 an hour. A gentleman at a poker table in the 5-seat game unzipped his pants and relieved his bladder on the dealer. I never caught the signal the dealer used, but it was effective as all the guys who normally collect boxes from the tables show up out of nowhere and removed him from the table like they were taking out the trash, which I think they were. The table broke up so they could clean, the dealer showered and put on a new uniform, and I saw her on the floor again a few hours later. Table games dealer here. I work at a casino in New Zealand. Had a Thai woman a few months ago betting $300K every hand. She lost $12 million at my table in less than an hour. The casino then paid for her private charter jet to Melbourne and back, which was $70K, just so that she could get more money. I'm not exactly sure why she had to go to Melbourne to get more money, but I was doing a 16-hour shift, and she came back to my table after her trip and dropped another 15 mil. Haven't had anyone close to spending that much money ever again. She'd also flash herself at dealers for luck and requested only young white dealers. Almost all baccarat dealers at my casino are Asian, so I had to deal with her every night for 10 days. Wait, so she spent at least $27 million at your table then? All of her weirdness and racism aside, what the actual hell? I know that running casinos is generally regarded as a ridiculously lucrative, albeit gross and depressing way to make money, but as a guy who's lived in New Zealand, that one woman alone had to constitute a majority of that place's earnings for a few years. There aren't big fancy casinos over there apart from maybe in Auckland. Bloody Jeffers. Also a warning that from this point on there's a couple of stories sprinkled throughout about people who decide they don't want to be alive anymore after losing big. So that's a heads up. A guy drove off the parking deck just to end things after he lost at the casino I worked for. Former table dealer here. I've had drunk guys tell me I'm the worst dealer ever, that I suck. I'd just reply, have a nice day. The other people at the table were generally on my side. I've higher rollers slam the table with their fists or not react at all to losing thousands. The worst and saddest one that sticks in my mind is a guy who was around $2K down on blackjack. This guy was nice. He was tipping pretty well. I was rooting for him as I tended to do. I knocked his 10s for good luck. Then he lost a big one and just yelled, "Frick!" so loud that the entire casino must have heard. It was the kind of desperation in his voice and everything about him that told me he couldn't afford to lose as much as he just lost. He went to the ATM and I rotated to another table. It was crap like that, the gosh darn smoke in my face, the sleep deprivation from the late nights that led me to get out of there. A lot of other unpleasant moments too, but they all blur together. Money was nice, but it wasn't for me. I was a waitress in a casino establishment 10 years ago. Self-deletions weren't common there, but they did happen. The saddest was a woman who threw up a rope and finished her evening strung up in the toilets. She had lost $20K or so from memory and was not a high roller type. 3 to 4 days later, her car was to be towed from the underground park. Sadly, she'd left her 2 fluffy dogs in there and nobody knew. The poor things were also dead. The establishment then put on parking patrol officers who check cars every few hours. They'd find live dogs and kids in there far too often. I quit after 6 months as I was tired of watching miserable zombies. My girlfriend's grandfather won it big one night and then was followed home by 4 people and killed for the money. So that's the worst way I've seen someone handle a win. The people that did it still write to her father asking for help with parole or whatever apparently. Worked as a security guard on a night shift. The biggest losers are in a fantasy land where they don't even notice. Never actually saw addicts get worried about their futures. I worked in banking for a bit, and being able to see people's accounts who are gamblers backs up this statement. They don't go in and get out, say, $500 on an ATM and then lose it, get upset and go home. They get 100, then 80, then 140. On my end, I'd see the transactions with the $3 fee attached all on the same night, within minutes of each other sometimes. It seems like sometimes they're in a trance and they probably have almost no idea how much money they've actually lost. One guy was so angry at his losses that he took 200 quarters, cut them in half, taped one side, and proceeded to put them in various slot machines. Once they entered the machine, it would jam up. I actually did work in a casino in Las Vegas a few years back, in VIP services. One of our high rollers who visited frequently had a very bad gambling problem that his wife was divorcing him over. He lost everything at the tables and couldn't even afford his plane ticket back home. He threatened to go to the roof of the hotel and throw himself off. The casino felt sorry for him. We ended up buying him a ticket back home. Never heard from him again after that. Yes, it did actually happen. It was a brand new casino, so I'm sure they didn't want to risk just ignoring his threats. Also, no one made him gamble. Vegas was not built on winners. I used to be a casino host on cruise ship casinos. I've seen people lose their crap a lot, but there's one woman I'll never forget. She was gambling so much. Towards the end of the cruise, I'd find her on the slots. She'd be crying and playing. I asked her what's wrong, and she said, "I can't afford to play anymore. This is all on my credit card." She was talking, playing, and crying at the same time. I banned her from the casino, but it was already too late. I also heard stories from colleagues that used to work for an Asian cruise company that they'd always keep one lifeboat half lowered because people would jump overboard after losing all their money. I worked in the cage before becoming a dealer. The saddest thing I used to commonly see was people getting cash advances of $15 and paying a $7.99 fee to do it. It was $7.99 to get up to $100 from the machine, with $15 being the minimum withdrawal. So they were paying a 50% fee to waste $15. I guess they thought that big jackpot was right around the corner. So sad. Desperation and an addictive personality are a truly terrible combination to have going on. Folks, if you're on your last $100, please, for the love of God, if you need something to fill your empty hours, buy a cheap addictive video game and do that in the evenings instead. It lasts a lot longer for your money. I was security at a casino for a few years. The saddest story for me was this older gentleman, let's call him Tom for privacy's sake. Tom would frequent the casino every day, spending anywhere from $200 to $300. I struck up a lot of conversations with him because he was a regular and he was a genuinely kind person who I enjoyed seeing. One day, Tom comes in and I can tell he's upset. I don't make anything of it, but after seeing the guy for a few years almost every day, that day he looked really off. So a couple of hours go by and I track him down and I ask, "How's the day going? Any big wins?" Just general chit-chat. He starts sobbing, tears running down his face. His wife had passed from sudden cardiac death, is what I believe he called it, the night before, and he was devastated. We talked for quite a while. I tried comforting him while he played the machines. I'd noticed he was betting extremely large, like $200 to $300 per spin on the slot machine. I knew that was a lot for him, but I didn't say anything because it's not my business, and I was sure it was a coping mechanism for him at the moment, doing something that he loved when he just lost the love of his life. Hours later, I saw him heading out the door. I ran up to catch up to him, caught him and wished him all the best and said, "See you soon." He smiled, said thanks for the chat and thank you for the condolences, and left. He booked a room in our hotel and self-deleted that night. A little while later, I found out through some other staff who were sort of friends with his family that he'd spent all of his money, every dime that evening, spinning high limit on the machines. I'm assuming just because he wanted a little enjoyment before he finished things up. It still makes me upset that I didn't invite him over or do anything else because I knew he was in pain. Haven't been in the gaming biz since the 1990s, but I've seen everything from tantrums on the floor to attacks on workers. The worst one, though, was some moron right out of prison with his homies who lost his money on the blackjack table, took it personally, went out to his car, waited for the dealer to get off work, followed him, and then beat the living crap out of him when he stopped for gas. Well, we had a guy jump from his suite on the 18th floor. We still have the divots in the pavement where his leg bones drove into the asphalt. My friend just started at the new Catskill Resort Worldwide Casino and has already said 2 people have been kicked out for doing the deed on the casino floor. One guy got undressed in the bathroom and started washing his clothes. That place has been open for 2 weeks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked casino EMS and security. Horsemen decide that they don't want to be alive in our venues all the time. They're alcoholics, so at least one drinks themselves to the hospital every year, and they like to knife each other too. Someone drove a car into the casino wall, not the doors, the wall. The driver had a traumatic brain injury and luckily didn't injure anyone else. Someone else left the casino drunk and on a bunch of substances, drove through someone's house and ended them. There was another self-deletion by a shotty in the parking lot. Someone else punched a machine and broke the giant touchscreen. That was $5,000 to replace, and that made them a felon. People are constantly taking too many substances in the bathrooms, like a lot, and others get so desperate that they'll wander up and down the aisles looking for pennies left on the machines. We had a guy jump off the parking garage. We had another shoot his wife's lover in the garage and kill him before turning the weapon over on himself. Not a casino employee, but the other day my father-in-law, who's security, watched an elderly lady lose everything at the poker table. She then went around and stole a couple of people's purses and wallets. When they confronted her and asked for ID, she wouldn't give it to them because they weren't the police. When the police arrived, she still wouldn't give them her ID or even her name, saying they couldn't arrest her if they didn't know who she was. Needless to say, they arrested her. The last thing the cops asked her was, "Are you at least going to cooperate and walk out with us to the car, or are you going to do this the hard way?" They had to carry her out, and she was kicking the windows in the back of the car the entire time. An older gentleman left the casino I was working at the time to go get the car while his wife went to the washroom. However, instead of getting to the car, he doused himself in gasoline and, well, you know what happened next. Not an employee, but my mum's friend won a slot machine jackpot. Security had to swoop in and save her because she was a very casual gambler and would use like 5 coins then leave. But that night, on one of her first coins, she won the jackpot. The people around her were gambling addicts, and some of them had been working that machine for hours beforehand and felt like it should have been their win. So they tried to attack her for the money, but she did get it in the end. This wouldn't have been a big win either because it was a small place, but still scary how far people will go. Yep, gambler's fallacy actually transforming into a rage when someone else wins is an angle of that way of thinking that I hadn't considered before, but now it seems like an inevitable conclusion in the casino environment. A guy jumped from the 4th story of the parking garage, note in his car stating that he lost everything, savings, retirement, college funds, all of it. I sat next to a guy. He drove a Pepsi truck. He said his mum died and left him $30,000. He had never seen this much money before, so he thought he could turn it into $100,000. We were at the blackjack table. He was getting wasted and crying inconsistently because of his mum, talking about her dying. The cocktail waitresses are taking advantage and egging him on the whole night, and he was tipping them $25 for every drink. In 2 hours, he loses everything. He has this look of nervousness on his face and said his wife was going to murder him if she found out about this because they have 4 kids and wanted to buy a house. He walked out. 10 minutes later, I went to my car and see that he got a DUI. In 24 hours, his mum had died, he got a ton of money, lost it all, will probably get divorced, got a DUI, and was sitting in the back of a cop car with blue balls from the cocktail waitresses. I watched my uncle lose everything at the blackjack table, so he proceeded to the bathroom, came out with his pants off and threw them on the table and said, "Pants plays." The dealer said, "We can't take your pants, sir." The guy said, "Why not? You've taken everything else." Needless to say, he was escorted out of the casino very upset. I've worked in casinos for nearly a decade, and the saddest ones are the players who lose and show no aggression or sadness at all. I had a player who was down $1 million US at the end of a night of roulette, and he had a completely vacant 1,000-yard stare look on his face as he quietly left. Not an employee, but my girlfriend and I were at a local casino for dinner on Saturday, so we decided to take a lap around the playing floor afterwards. We were walking by the blackjack tables and noticed a small crowd around a guy who had a pile of chips in front of him. After it's clear that he'd lost it all to the dealer, he started screaming and that he couldn't lose, and began to slam his head into the table. He ended up leaving in handcuffs. Oh boy, the guy who lost $100 million then sued Caesars for allowing him to continue to gamble at its properties has to be up there. You know, if you had $100 million and just frickin' loved gambling, you could blow 7 to 10K a night every night for the rest of your life and probably clear another 1 to 2 million a year in investment income. And losing a few grand is almost always enough to get all the comped food, drinks, and rooms you'd like. You could live like a king, tossing chips to all the pretty girls, and secure in the knowledge that as long as you stick to your budget, it wouldn't hurt you in the long run. And you could do it as long as you liked. Yet this guy blows it all in a year. I have never understood people like that. I worked as a slot tech, caught my casino cheating customers with a promo wheel with weights, so it was impossible to win. I reported it to a lottery official on site. Nothing was done, and I was fired for a BS reason a week after the wheel was removed. Figured that since everyone is posting about gamblers losing, I'd post something about a casino losing. My uncle worked at a casino for years. He had a lot of horror stories, but the worst by far was this one guy who lost a large sum of money playing cards. The second he lost, he pulled a get out and ended things right there at the table. Not an employee, but there was this one guy who incurred millions in debt from gambling in casinos, went on a rampage, set some casino tables on fire, and killed 37 people in the process. They all died from suffocation and smoke inhalation. I've had a few patrons lose a ton and never come back, only to find out later they drove their car into a tree or put a shotty in their mouth. I do have a good story about the worst I saw someone handle a win. There was this older gentleman who was a regular and a total jerk. Never tipped, never smiled or said hello, and was always in a foul mood. I was watching him play a 50-cent machine one night when he hit 3 jackpot symbols and won $5,000. I went up to him and congratulated him, and I'll never forget the bemused look on his face. When the machine hits a single payout of over $1,200, the machine locks up and won't spin again until an attendant resets it. He just kept hitting buttons in vain, trying to keep playing like a child whose toy stopped working. When I told him that the machine wasn't going to spin until we paid him, his only words were, "Well, can I play this one?" and motioned to the machine next to his. I told him that he could, and he moved over and went straight back to his zombie trance. When we brought his jackpot winnings to him, he huffed and puffed because we'd asked him to stop playing for a minute while we counted out his $5,000. It's like the money didn't even matter. Working at a casino can be a lot of fun, but the worst thing about it is that you know you're a substance dealer and your whole job is to make sure people keep taking your product. Look, folks, the narrator has already segued into video games once already in the story grouping, but I'd like to stress again how similar some of these gamers are to regular PC or console gamers with their need to do these motions just for the thrill of playing the game itself rather than winning anything. It may not satisfy all of you, but if you're ever in a toss-up between becoming a gambler or a gamer, maybe take the latter. It seems cheaper. I had a roulette spinner tell me that one time a woman came in and gave this other lady a check to cash out and announced, "All right, time for me to win my rent money for the month." The dealer handed her the check back and said, "Ma'am, we're not accepting your money in this hotel. Please take this check and go pay part of your rent with it and work to pay the rest. This is supposed to be a place of fun, not where you risk your life." I saw a drunk guy pour his beer all over the slot machine after losing. Needless to say, security came over where he proceeded to speak only Spanish. They brought out an interpreter, so he refused to speak at that point. They escorted him somewhere else. I work in a city with casinos. Someone unalived themselves and their body was found on top of an elevator in the casino's parking structure. These sort of things happen pretty often in casinos. I wasn't working at the time, but rather playing poker when a guy went super tilt after a bad hand. Anyway, he dove onto the table and thrashed around, scattering the cards and throwing everyone's chip stacks all over the place before security wrestled him out. It took a good 30+ minutes to sort everything out. That's also the day we came to respect just how powerful casino surveillance cameras are. They were able to locate and replace every single chip to exactly where it was before his tantrum. When I see this question, I think of this high roller who lost a crap ton and then proceeded to make an elaborate bomb extortion plot that ultimately failed because his ransom instructions were way too complicated to follow. When I was in Vegas, I was watching a very intense game of blackjack on Fremont Street. The guy bet everything he had, convinced, since he was on a winning streak, that this would be the hand that doubled his winnings. Unshockingly, he busts. As soon as they swooped his chips away, he began slamming his hands on the table, screaming, "What the frick? What the frick?" with his girlfriend, dressed in a cheesy tight mini dress and 7-inch heels, screaming at him and telling him that he promised her a Birkin purse with that money, and crying. An unsuspecting guy accidentally bumped into this irate dude, and that just made the guy lose his crap. A chair went flying, the guy had bumped into stepped up and started asking him if he wants a piece of this. Shoves are exchanged, and the screaming starts just as a high heel is thrown straight past the sore loser's face and right into someone else's head. I wanted to stay and watch the throwdown, but my boyfriend yanked me away with a solid nope. Just as well, there were 2 furious-looking Vegas PD officers who were literally shoving their way through the crowd as we stepped away.
What was your best "you have no power here" moment? When I realized I could just hang up on my sister when she wanted to yell at me on the phone. As a 12-year-old, that was a powerful moment. My sister is 6 years older than me, so after she was 18 and out of the house, she realized she could talk to me any way she wanted, and if I wanted to say something back, she would run to our parents. Fast forward 6 years, her and my parents took me out to eat for my 18th birthday, and she caught an attitude and I cussed her out. She gets the fish look on her face and looks at my parents, at which my mom laughs, shrugs, and says, "He's an adult now and he's tired of your crap." This is funny. Me and my brother did not get along that much when we were younger, but the moment he moved out, we got a lot closer. Sometimes you just don't make good roommates with people. I worked at Domino's and there was this old lady who ordered from us a lot and was always unpleasant. One day she calls and makes an order she must make a lot because she knew exactly how much it was supposed to cost down to the penny. I put in her order and tell her how much it is, and she starts getting upset because the order is 2 cents more than what she usually pays, and starts accusing me of trying to steal money from her. She asks, "How much money do you make stealing 2 cents from every customer?" Well, if I was trying to steal money and I did it to 100 customers, I would have made a whole $2. I didn't know what to do because she wouldn't accept the order and it was exactly how much she thought it would be. And there's nothing I can do to remove 2 cents from an order, so I asked the manager and she just tells me to hang up. I was new at the time, and I'm guessing that this wasn't the first time the store got screwed over by this woman. It felt amazing, and that was the only time I had to deal with that customer. I used to work at a call center, and I loved hanging up on terrible customers. I once worked for a shady company that sold and repaired expensive American vacuum cleaners. I was the service manager. I had planned a 6-week scuba diving trip with a mate for 2 years. They were well aware of this and said it was fine. When the time came close, I put in my application for 6 weeks leave. I was called into the owner's office and was told that I could only take 3 weeks. I had saved up the time with their permission. I pointed this out and they were adamant that 3 weeks was the most that they were prepared to authorize. I even tried to negotiate them to 5 weeks, but they firmly rejected it. So I walked away from the office, wrote my resignation letter, and left. Had a great holiday diving the Great Barrier Reef. They rang me up weekly for a solid 3 months offering all sorts of incentives to come back, but by then I had already won a great government job. Screw you, Tony and Ann. If the military ever taught me anything, it's to get everything in writing. That, "Hey sir, I'm taking leave for the 4th of July for 4 weeks, and his, "Yeah, sure," in passing in February means nothing unless you have it in some form of physical writing. Email, paperwork, or whatever you have, document everything. I agree with this statement. Always create a paper trail at your job. It will most likely save your butt in the future. My boss sold the company, and about a week after the official switch to the new owners, he called me up and asked me to do something. I told him my consulting fees were $120 an hour. He didn't take me up on it, unfortunately. When I left a job, I was invited to meet the CEO because he was unhappy I was leaving and wanted to understand why. I explained that I was not being paid enough and the recently announced pay raise was not good enough. He got irritated and in a patronizing tone started trying to lecture me on how I should have handled the situation better. I interrupted him. He didn't like that. So I added, "I'm leaving. I have nothing to lose," and then informed him that I had already been let down over pay multiple times, had witnessed others trying to get more pay and being refused, so I had no interest in begging to be paid what I already deserved to be paid. At that company that I worked for, the managers just stopped giving exit interviews at all. It just became a big circus. Man, the only job I ever quit was also the only job that ever gave me an exit interview. I had nothing really to say, so I ended up just saying that the break room needed recycling bins. The interviewer was so confused. I had a friend who worked in the selling of online spicy content advertisements. He was making them millions a year via cam and had all his clients up there spending. Repeatedly asked for a raise and they said that they couldn't afford it. He got another job that almost doubled his salary, and then he showed them the offer and asked for $10K more than they were offering, or he would go to the new firm with his clients. They cursed him out, told him that he was a traitor, and said that there were more dignified ways to do this. In the end though, they gave him the wage he wanted. He asked for it in writing, and then he forwarded it to the rival firm to negotiate the original offer. They matched the additional $10K and he bounced anyway with his clients and got his old jerk bosses to help him get another $10K of salary at his new job. Had a client freak out on us and harass us with cell phone calls every few minutes because we couldn't accommodate her needs. She wanted to make her countertops larger than the actual slab of granite. You can't grow rock. So we just refused her deposit and told her not to call us anymore. She was speechless. She was trying to get a discount and now she had to start the whole process elsewhere. We don't abide by the customer is always right. Firing the customer is definitely a thing. Sometimes 20% of your business requires 80% of the effort. Businesses that want to do better look hard at that 20%. I did wedding photography for a few years before every person on the planet had a digital camera. During a consultation, the fiance asked me if I had an umbrella insurance policy in case they were disappointed with the photos and wanted to sue me. He wasn't joking. He called me later to let me know that they decided to choose me as their photographer. I told him thanks, but no thanks, citing creative differences. Some people are idiots. Reminds me of a story back when I was in high school. One of our extended group of friends was a semi-annoying guy most of us tolerated. We'll call him Todd. Todd got into a car accident with one of our other friends and came out with a couple of cuts and bruises. No big deal. A couple of months later, we were all joking around in front of another friend's place and are about to hop into another friend's car. Todd decides that this is a good time to say, "Hey, make sure you guys don't get into an accident. I didn't want to sue the other friend at the time, but it was probably a mistake. Could have gotten a lot of money." Friend with the car's mom hears that from the porch and runs over to cuss Todd out and informs my friend that since she pays for the insurance on the car, like a nice mom, Todd is banned from that vehicle, just in case, because she doesn't want any bloody lawsuits. Everyone else in the friend group talks it over and agrees this is a sensible precaution. And that's the story of why Todd had to take the bus everywhere until he got his own car. Man, I think everyone's had a Todd in their friend group before. This was my last job. Was hired to be doing PC repair, only to be told an hour before my first shift that there wasn't any hours available for that, and that they could put me elsewhere. Begrudgingly, I accepted as I turned down another position and needed the work. Fast forward a few months and the manager decides I'm going to be filling in for the only person handling shipping and receiving for this giant department store, single-handedly with 3 days of training. So of course things aren't going well, as this is a 2-person position at minimum for 8 hours and I'm expected to do it in 6. The last day on the job, I'm swamped. Vendors are fighting with each other over the dock space and another manager comes up freaking out on me because I couldn't get the extra work done, and I told her repeatedly that I couldn't be done. Exasperated, I pleaded my case, to which she callously said, "I don't give a crap." Now I'm getting mad. She replied to me at this point and says, "Do you know who you're talking to?" I replied, "Yeah, the bee who now is running this poop show because I'm out." $11.35 an hour with my promised hours gutted was not worth it. I was hired to build a website. I knew basic HTML and was forced to apply. They wanted to pay me an hourly wage rather than actually getting a professional. In short, the site consisted of listing all the items they had for sale in pretty much a single table on the site, as they took old appliances, TVs, freezers, fridges, etc., and sold them to various third world countries. So I had to take the pictures of all the products to have the images on the sites. They give me a cheap camera that dies after every 2 pictures I take. Boss's wife and another random staff member are there. All they do is sit on their butts chatting and do no real work, leaving the actual work to the other staff. I point out that the camera is dead. They tell me that I'm lying. Suit yourself, I'll sit down and do nothing at all until the boss is back next week. The next day I'm told to do work, point out that the camera is still broken, and get told to take it back if I want to, but while I'm out of the office I'm not getting paid. So I stay sat down doing nothing. I will point out that the actual site was built in the first day. It was literally just a white page with their contact details on it and a list of the items and prices. Hardly some long drawn out thing that actually needed work. So the next day, guy comes in to look at the stock and buy some, and asked if we have a camera. I immediately offer him the one that was given and point out that it doesn't work, but if he can get it going, he's welcome to use it. Boss's wife states that it does in fact work and that I'm an idiot. Potential buyer looks it over for a few minutes, tells her rather bluntly that it doesn't work, and I grab my coat and tell her I'm done here as well. Boss did try calling me the week after to go back, but I had no intention of working in that office with her. Plus, what am I going to do once I've gotten the pictures anyways? I was hardly going to be kept on to take one picture every month or so. I would have probably stayed at that job if I was collecting a paycheck for doing nothing. My old job had so much downtime in between assignments that I started taking my laptop to work and editing my YouTube videos. I was able to put out so much content while still getting paid. I was working in retail and a customer walked up and asked if since the ATM was broken, if she could buy something then return it for cash. I had no clue, so I called over another employee who had been there for a while and they said no. Furious, she demanded to speak to our manager. We call over the supervisor of our section and he listened to her question and he said no. Furious, she demands his manager. He calls over the manager and she shows up. Surprising, the answer was no. Customer is red in the face and demands another manager. We call over another manager, wink wink. She asks again and he says no. When she said she wanted his manager, the owner said, "I'm the owner of this store. The answer is no. It's against company policy." She stormed out, surprisingly not asking for the CEO of the company. She didn't take no from 2 employees, 1 supervisor, 1 manager, or the owner. And Jesus freaking Christ, when you have 5 people of increasing power lined up telling you no, and there is a line of bored customers behind you, I think you need to stop. As someone who worked retail for many years, I will tell you people will complain as long as they can if they think they can get what they want. I had found another job and was just waiting it out to get my bonus. For about 3 months, I was free to express myself in ways I wouldn't have otherwise. I had noticed that my vacation time had not been approved and normally I would have asked about it, but I decided to see how it might play out. My manager called me in about 2 weeks before my vacation to inform me that it was denied. I wasn't the least upset, but I informed her that I was going to take it anyways. She threatened me in every way under the sun, which only made me laugh at her. Everyone was surprised when I left her office smiling as they had heard her. I went to check my desk, printed off my resignation and gave it to her. Got my bonus, got my vacation, and also got an extra 2 weeks paid because I was going to a competitor and they didn't want me sharing information. I did something similar. I handed in my 2 weeks notice at this one place as I had already got hired in another city, and I was going to move. The manager, who was just the worst human being spreading misery in a bag of skin, tried to tell me that it's my responsibility to find and train a replacement. And if she doesn't like them, then I'll have to stay until she finds someone she does like. I told her straight up, in 2 weeks, I'm gone. Or you can fire me right now. I don't care. I'm not spending 1 second of my time finding a replacement. That's your problem. It's not my fault you're such an insufferable thunder bee that no one wants this job. At that point, she was actually yelling at me. I could no longer use this place as a reference, like I could possibly give a crap. I can't use my last job as a reference either. I made a TikTok video of myself flipping off every camera in the building on my last day. I also hid a bunch of comedic stickers of myself all over the building for people to randomly find. Company did restructuring and laid off about 30 of us. My boss, picture female Limburg, gave me my contract package, which also included a lecture of if I was a better worker, the company wouldn't be doing this. After a month, they realized it was a mistake and told us that they were nullifying our contracts and that we could have our jobs back. I said that my attorney wasn't aware of a contract nullification given in the language in the document. And if they didn't want to stand by their commitment, we had already retained counsel, so whatever would happen, would happen. They came back and said we could have another 1-year package over and above salary if we stayed for a full year. I quit on the 366th day and my boss told me that she was hurt and that this was very hard for her. I just called her a psychopath and walked out of the building. I was in a wedding party and there was a brief lull in between scheduled parts and we were all just milling around waiting. The bridesmaid, known for being obnoxiously bossy, starts barking out orders to every single person. As soon as she's finished, the wedding planner, who was standing right behind her, says, "Nobody do any of that," and then told us to sit tight. It was great. There's always that one person that tries to take charge when somebody else is already in charge. Got out of the Army and joined the Air Force National Guard in my home state. 20 minutes after leaving my new base for the first time, I receive a phone call from a guy introducing himself as a sergeant first class from the Army Reserve, informing me that his system shows my name had been pulled from the reserve pool to deploy to Iraq within 3 months, and he congratulated me. I kindly informed him that 1, I had just returned from deployment before getting out and was still guaranteed more than 3 months stateside, and 2, I had enlisted in the Air Guard and therefore exempt. He got irritated, raises his tone of voice, and said, "Well, you better get that paperwork to me ASAP because my system says you're going." I told him I signed a contract which binds me to that, not your system. It's not my job to update to ensure your system is up to date. I give him the name of the organization I was now affiliated with, the city, the state I was in, and my recruiter's name, rank, and personal phone number. Now you have several different ways to contact who you need in order to get your system updated, and I just hung up on him. Question? Did you join the Air National Guard in part to keep what tried to happen from happening? Was this pretty common for the Army to try to reel people back in? No and no. I switched because as part of the out processing from active duty, you had to schedule an appointment with the National Guard rep. This particular guy touted $20,000 bonus for my job in this particular group announcement. But when I went in for my appointment just 4 days later, suddenly it was gone. I didn't like being taken for a fool. The Air National Guard offered said enlisting bonus plus a little less grueling lifestyle. Overwhelming majority of inactive reserves for the armed forces never get recalled unless there's some nationally known and televised escalation in fighting, such as Iraq in 07 or 08. Or World War III breaks out suddenly and there's a huge demand for seasoned service members. Credit union tried to bill my father's estate for a card they wouldn't provide documentation for. I told them in detail why this wasn't going to happen. After my father passed away, there was a small amount of estate-related issues to take care of. I was the legal executor of his estate. While I was sorting through things, I started getting letters from a local credit union regarding a credit card account of his that they wanted paid off. Problem was, I could find no evidence on my end in all of my dad's paperwork of him having had that credit card. And though I knew he had a savings account with them, I didn't recall any prior bills from them regarding said credit card. And I had been handling his bills close to a year before his passing. I went in to ask for evidence and got told that only the CEO could handle the matter. She was on vacation that week, so I left my name and number to have her get back to me. When she finally got back to me, she didn't offer any evidence, but instead offered a number of demands that I immediately pay the money, and if there wasn't enough money in my dad's estate, I should sell the house that he owned for the alleged debt of $600, pointing out that he had not, in fact, owned said house for quite some time by the time he died fell on deaf ears. The letters continued, some personally written and rather harassing in tone. I was feeling rather concerned as I didn't know exactly what they could do or what my options were. I know the smart thing would have been to retain an estate lawyer to handle it, but what do you do when you're not an attorney or don't have the money to retain one? I had been handling things myself as the most financially minded of my siblings, and trying to handle things as a matter of common sense and common decency. There wasn't a lot of assets or debts with the estate. It seems that it should have been pretty straightforward, and other than this case, all of it went smoothly. Fortunately, Oregon state laws are actually really easy to read for a layman. I spent several nights studying the various sections and determined exactly how things should go, and I wrote a letter, sent certified delivery with a return receipt, back to the credit union CEO. In the letter, I stated the following. First, that there is no evidence present for the claim. I was formally denying in my capacity as the executor, which the law allowed, with the window of opportunity of 30 days to appeal the decision in court. Second, that if she wished to make any appeal to me personally and save on the court fees, she needed to provide documentation of the account, including a record of all transactions and changes to justify the amount claimed. Naturally, I got a letter back 4 weeks later. It contained some paperwork, including the paperwork establishing my dad's savings account, but nothing establishing the credit card. Further, the letter stated that it would be too difficult to provide full records of all the transactions. Any bankers out there, take note, never tell a programmer that it's too difficult for you to access your own data. We know it's either BS or that you're admitting incompetence. This would have been a 5-minute database query for me, and that's if I had to look up the tables first. The letter reiterated the demand for immediate payment, again stating the house, which again, not actually my dad's, but she kept insisting it was. and said that it would need to be sold for payment. I wrote another letter. In this letter, I clarified several points for her. First, that as she had not provided the required documentation, she had not actually made an appeal that would be subject to evaluation, let alone acceptance. Therefore, the original denial of claim stood unchanged. Second, that it is not her place to determine my father's assets, as she is not the executor of state. Third, that even if her claim were to be granted, Oregon law requires 6 months from the descendant's passing to receive all claims before any of those claims may be paid out. And by demanding immediate payment, she was attempting to get me to break the law. Fourth, that Oregon law declares priority of claims by the nature of them, and credit card debts were ranked N, where the above included taxes, medical debts, and various other things. Even if her claim had been granted, she could not be paid unless there was money left after paying all the higher priority debts. And even if the house had been included, that wouldn't have been the case. And fifth, as the 1 month deadline for appealing in court would have expired by the time they received this letter, they had exhausted all of their legal options, and further attempt to pursue this claim would constitute unlawful harassment, and charges would be pressed in such an instance. I never heard back from her again. This was a massive W if I've ever seen one. Good on the OP, even though I didn't understand half of it. What is the dumbest but 100% serious thing that someone has said to you? My sister thought diet pills were low-calorie pills. Her actual quote was, "Wait, diet pills aren't for losing weight? They're not just a healthier version of regular pills?" Is it bad that I understand how she could get confused? You stupid idiot. How can there be shadows on the moon if there's no gravity? Working in retail, and a customer came up to me and said in a very angry tone, "What is that noise? You need to tell your manager to fix whatever that is." That's rain. It's raining outside, lady. I will say, when I worked at a big warehouse store, when it rained hard, it was pretty loud. We were in a car and an ambulance passed us with its lights on. My friend turned to me with a very serious look on her face and asked, "If you were a blind and deaf car driver, how could you know how to pull over for the ambulance?" That became her senior quote. I had a similar thought the other day. My younger sister asked me why ambulances have flashing lights. I said that it was to get the attention of drivers, especially those that may be deaf. I then thought to myself, the loud sirens must be to get the attention of blind drivers. You would think that blind driving is an obvious no-no, right? Well, I learned recently that blind people can legally get a license to carry, which is pretty wild to me. My then 16-year-old sister once told me while cutting an onion, "God, why did they put the paper on these onions so tight?" She actually thought the skin of an onion was some kind of wrapper. I used to work in a kitchen, and one of the pot washers was cleaning a slicer, and not exactly being careful. I told him the correct way to do it, so he didn't chance cutting any of his fingers. With a straight face and being completely serious, he told me that he didn't care if he cut his fingers off. It would just grow back, like a starfish. "Hi, is this the Krusty Krab?"
"No, this is Patrick."
I was once told that substance dogs at the airport, schools, etc. were addicted to the substance they were looking for, so each airport had a different dog for each substance. This person was a university graduate. They were probably really wasted while watching that episode of Family Guy where Brian becomes a substance-sniffing dog and gets addicted to a certain powder. I bet they saw that episode on TikTok, and then there was Subway Surfer and someone cutting soap next to it. This happened last night at the bar I work at. I get a ticket for 2 Chardonnays, one with ice. All right, one with ice. And one as it's supposed to be. There we go. 3 minutes later, in storms a lady with 2 wine glasses in her hand. "Look at this," she says, and somewhat slams the glasses onto the bar. I am a little shocked that the glasses didn't break, and I did as I was told. I looked at the glasses. "Yes, 1 Chardonnay with ice and 1 without. What's the matter, ma'am?" I ask. "Why did she get more wine than me?" she asked, annoyed. "More wine?" I ask. "There's not more in either one. Both have 120 milliliters exactly, as it's supposed to be. Would you like some ice too?" "But that one is fuller," and she points at the one with ice. "Yes, it has ice in it," I reply. "Why does she get more wine with the ice? Why don't I get more wine?" "Look, this one has that much more wine," showing the difference between the glasses by pinching her fingers. Well, you get where this is going. This lady didn't understand that if you fill 2 glasses of wine and add ice to one, the ice will make it look fuller. But it's just because the ice takes up space. I had to literally show her that it's just the ice making it look like the glass is fuller, which it of course was, but didn't have more wine. Even then, I think she still thought she was being mistreated. When you have to explain Archimedes' freaking principle to an irate customer, you should win a prize. Doing so sounds frustrating enough in a normal setting. Now picture a crowded bar, 2 rows of people waiting to order drinks, a ticket machine spitting out orders from the terrace and the seating area. But damn, I wanted to end this lady. In the end, I took out the ice from the glass, told her, look, the same. Now I add the ice, just the ice, and there you go. I didn't add more wine, did I? And then she sorta agreed and sat her butt back down. Still don't think she trusted me on the there is no more wine in it part. If I ever open up a service-based business, I figure each of my employees should get 1 F off per year of service. It will be well advertised to our customers that if you are the lucky recipient of said F off, you should assume that you're the worst customer that employee has dealt with in the last year. And you should ban yourself from the premises. While working at my first library job, there was this young college girl, I'm assuming freshman, who came into the public library for some books for class. She seemed to be doing fine, so I leave her alone until she repeatedly makes very frustrated noises, so I offer my help. Can I help you find something? I need the Korean Bible. The Bible in Korean? Yes. We might have that in the international collection. Follow me. I go to said collection and do not find the Bible in Korean. I offer her the Bible in other languages or a novel in Korean. On seeing the text of the Korean novel, she looks very confused. No, this isn't it. I need the Korean Bible. Right, so you basically need the Bible written in the Korean language. No, I need the Korean Bible. It's like the Bible, but it's in Arab. Me trying not to facepalm. Do you perhaps mean the Quran? This is also the same job where my 6-year-old boss asked me what pitcher and catcher meant on a gay blog she happened upon. And when I explained, she very cheerfully walked away saying, well, 'tis better to give than receive. Heard 2 girls talking on the bus to my class. Girl 1, let's go to Hawaii this summer. Girl 2, I wish. I don't like to fly though. Girl 1, it's fine. I think the bridge is almost finished. We can just drive. These girls were students at a university. Okay, so after reading this, I instantly Googled how long that drive would be if a bridge existed, and I found this comment. Okay, I'll bite. I'm not gonna take the it's impossible end of story route here. We all know that's true. Assume, despite all the engineering challenges, someone found a way to safely build a bridge between San Francisco and Honolulu that didn't bankrupt the United States in the process. Consider that it is roughly 2,400 miles between San Francisco and Honolulu. That's roughly the same distance between San Francisco and Detroit. And Google Maps says that it'll take 35 hours to get there, without rest stops or meal stops or hotel stops. Assuming the highway is built to federal interstate standards, I would imagine it would take about that long to get there, again, without stops. Probably about 4 days or so if they actually built rest stops on the bridge. But if you had one bad accident on that bridge, I would expect the time to multiply exponentially. So when is the tow truck gonna get here? AAA says sometime tomorrow. A friend thought human specimen plus store-bought chicken egg equaled a live creature. But in reality, it's just really salty scrambled eggs. Excuse me, can you tell me where Half Dome is? I was outside the Ahwahnee in Yosemite and just pointed at it. Is it behind the mountain? The mountain is Half Dome. Oh, I thought Half Dome was a rock. It's a really big rock. The sad thing is I know Yosemite employees get questions like this all the time. In the valley, I only carry my climbing ropes inside a rope bag, so people don't ask me questions like this nearly as much. Knew a pathological liar in high school, told everyone she was allergic to peanuts and forbade anyone to have peanuts even in the same room as her. One day I saw her eating Reese's peanut butter cups and my friends and I said, "Aren't you deathly allergic to peanuts?" To which she replied, "They use different kinds of peanuts in Reese's that I'm not allergic to." My grandma said she was allergic to peanuts, yet ate peanut butter all the time. She said it was the solid texture of peanuts that made her allergic. I mean, I loved my grandparents, but what the hell? I know all about pathological liars. I used to work with a guy that said he couldn't wear silver watches because his sweat melted them, and if he wore a gold watch, it would make the watch spin out of control like a time travel movie effect. A customer brought in an iPhone with standing water in it. I showed them and explained that is why the phone is no longer turned on. He proceeded to yell at me in front of other customers. "I have a PhD and I can guarantee you water does not do things like that to electronics." I said, "All right." and just returned his phone to him. It's obvious that his supposed PhD degree was a blanket response to any verbal conflict, but even if he did have a PhD, how exactly would that make him qualified in other subjects than the one he studied? Maybe his PhD stood for pretty huge dent in his head. A friend was totally confident he would be able to survive a plane crash because of his tuck and roll technique. He was 100% sober. Until probably 12 or 13 years old, I was pretty confident I could jump before hitting the ground, in the case of a plummeting elevator or plane crash. I was sure that I could survive a flood no problem if I just put on pull floaties on my arms. I drove past an IKEA dealership the other day with my wife, and she just started freaking out. She yelled, "When did that get there? Can we go?" Then she got really quiet and looked away. I paused and then realized what happened and say, "You thought that was IKEA, yeah?" We've driven past that dealership almost every day for over a year. Marriage, a lifetime of one person saying stupid stuff for the other to mock them about it, and vice versa. It's beautiful. When my husband and I were still dating, we were watching TV and a commercial for the Curious Case of Benjamin Button movie came on. About a minute after it was over, we had the following conversation. Him, "So is that real?" Me, "Is what real?" Like, do people get the disease that Benjamin Button had? Are you asking if people are born old and then age into babies? Yeah, you're right. Never mind. Forget I asked. I have never forgotten that he asked. I've been a cook for 15 years. One time a server asked me to rush a chicken breast she forgot to ring in. I said, "Okay, it'll be a few minutes. It's still a bit raw." "Just give it to me, it's fine," she says. I tell her that I don't feel like giving anyone salmonella poisoning today and she will have to wait. Her jaw drops and her face turns red. She rather belligerently shouts just to give it to her because she's losing tip money. Then adds, "Besides, people don't get salmonella poisoning from chickens, they get it from salmon. You're a cook, you should know that by now." Every person in the room did the slow neck turn of "what the hell did I just hear?" and just stared at her. Dude, it's not a jokey matter. Chickenella poisoning is serious. I used to work at Best Buy and I had a customer, lady in her 30s, come in with her plasma television on a flat cart. She says, "I need the plasma refill." So I give her the old customer service fake laugh because I thought it had to be a joke. But the look on her face and the pissed tone showed me that she was serious. I took her to the home theater department, and from a distance I can hear her going off about plasma refill prices. Or shouldn't the warranty cover the plasma? I used to work at a plasma donation clinic. For those who aren't aware, it's part of your blood. And at the place I worked, it was used specifically to help people with immune disorders. We would tell people this when it was their first time. And there's posters all over the place about specific kinds of people it helped. I had someone who was donating ask if there was any way to track his plasma so that he could buy the TV that it was used in. These stories just made me look up at the old plasma TV I have hanging on my wall. My uncle once said, "The earth is flat and the edges are covered with heavy layers of snow that no one can cross." He also said that the moon landing was fake, gravity is fake, and airline companies are in on a conspiracy and so much more. It was a very fun argument, I'll tell you that. You can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. Wait, gravity is fake? I'm curious how that uncle explained why we aren't all floating around then. A girl I once had to work with kept bringing bottles of Pepsi frozen solid to work. One day I finally asked why she freezes them, and she says you take away all the carbs by doing it. You remove all the carbohydrates by removing the carbonation. That chick was dense. You should have played along. If you remove all the carbon, it isn't organic anymore. I had a guy in a pub, completely adamant to the point of red-faced anger, swearing on the Bible that you could see New York from the Dongle Coast on a good clear day. I was in tears laughing. For those who have no idea what the Dongle Coast was, like myself, it is apparently in Ireland. A woman can become pregnant from touching a man's hands. Grade school teacher in Argentina. A woman stopped me in the grocery store when I was in my early teens to tell me that I could cure my acne by rubbing lady juice all over it. I assure you, she was dead serious. Before finding out that the woman was serious, I was curious if that was some form of flirting. It didn't happen to me firsthand, but a friend from New Mexico was asked while in another state if they spoke English, if they needed a passport to visit the US, and if the water is drinkable in New Mexico. I live in New Mexico. I get those questions a lot when I go even a couple of states away. It's more common than you'd think. Well, I live in a state where cowboys are really popular, and when I travel, I've met people who are surprised that I drive a car and not ride a horse everywhere. Do you know how expensive it is to take care of a horse? My stepmom, as she ripped the bandage off my sister's third-degree burn. It just needs fresh air. She then made my sister clean the chicken coop with a large, now exposed burn wound. Of course it got infected, almost killed my sister. She recovered, thankfully. Another gem from the same woman, while scolding us for getting bored and asking to leave after 4 hours in a museum, we could have gone to see Lewis and Clark's first plane. With my extensive experience with fairy tales, it tells me that your stepmom is trying to kill you. Watch out for any friendly woodsmen, and make sure you always carry rocks with you. And of course, know where the local dwarves are. Also, only eat apples that are uniformly colored. My brain automatically went to, don't touch my exposed area, stepmom. I really need to get off the internet. Years ago, while working at a cafe, a couple came up to me and asked me if Saddam Hussein was Russian. The Iraq War had just begun, so I snickered and said, of course not. The boyfriend turned to his girlfriend with a smug, victorious look and said, see, I told you he was German. If you're not Russian, you're obviously German. I don't see how they got that wrong. I've posted this before on Reddit at some point, but it's perfect for this question. My college assigns emails with your first initial, middle initial, then last name. So my email ended up being Dr. Last Name at college, as my first and middle initials are D and R. I jokingly told two dudes that I was with and how people I email think I'm a doctorate. One of them got up to go to the bathroom, and the other one was real quiet for a few seconds and then said, so did you work for the school over the summer? How did you become a doctor? It was the first week of freshman year, and I was 18. I had one quirky professor who would refer to all of his students as Doctor, their last name, in class. After that semester ended, I kept running into former classmates while hanging out with friends, and they would always call me Doctor, my last name. I also worked on campus as a tutor, so while out drinking with friends, I would hear some guy yelling, Dr. OP, hey! And my friends would say, wait, you have a PhD? And I would say, no, it's just some crazy guy. Then the guy would come up to me and say how much I helped him learn math and how I'm an awesome teacher. After he left, my friends were convinced that I was a math teacher with a PhD, and for some reason I was lying about it. This was reinforced each time we saw another one of my classmates, and they'd do the same thing. Hey now, superheroes aren't the only people that need secret identities. Teachers need them nowadays too. My mom worked at a credit union and had a member ask if she could deposit cash through the mobile deposit. My old roommate when choosing from a bowl of candy. I've decided I'm gonna go with Starburst instead of Twix because the fruit is healthier than chocolate. She was dead serious. Here in the UK, we got a lot of American kids shows, especially big ones like SpongeBob, Animaniacs, etc. These shows normally have the 4th of July special about the Declaration and War of Independence. With that as a topic of conversation, this is the genuine discussion I had with someone when I was 14. Me. The Simpsons made a joke about that during episode of 4th of July I forgot the name of. Friend. Yeah, I watched that one. The British sound like jerks. Me, slow blinking. Come again? You know, the British. The guys they always talk about when they do those kind of specials. I bet we could take them. Me again. Daniel, what country do we live in? Friend. England? Cue very quick explanation of British geography, with Daniel refusing to believe he was British until he went home and asked his mum. You should get off your tablet while it's storming. Lightning could travel through the Wi-Fi and shock you. My mother. I was once making small talk with an acquaintance, and I told her that I had flown out to visit my family in Korea over the summer. She got this smug grin on her face and said, you can't fly to Korea, it's an island. My son was born on February 29th. Woman asked me if he needed to have 5 actual birthdays before starting kindergarten, or if he could still go when he was 5 years old. My friend said this once, I don't worry about the price of gas going up. I only ever put $20 in at a time. Evolution isn't real. We just hatched out of eggs one day. A girl at my school. I used to work at a call center for a wireless service provider. A woman called in inquiring about how much we charged to use her phone while she was traveling internationally. I said it depends on the country and asked where she was headed. As serious as can be, she responds with, Wyoming. I barely got to my mute button before I erupted in laughter. And in case you're curious, I did not mishear her, nor was she calling from outside the US. I clarified with her. She legitimately thought Wyoming was a different country. Plus, if you could hear how she talked and stuff, you literally wouldn't even give her the benefit of the doubt. When I was in China, some guy asked me if I wanted to learn English. I told him that I live in Canada, so I already know English. He was curious why I spoke English in Canada instead of Canadese. About a year ago, dude flipped open his flip phone during the daytime and started taking a picture of the moon that was clearly visible. We lock eyes before he snaps the photo and he says to me, "This happens only once every hundreds of years." I just kept walking. One night I was working at T-Bell. This girl comes through the drive-thru absolutely hammered. She was destroyed. She kept yelling at us to give her French fries. I just kept telling her that we don't sell French fries. Finally, my manager comes over and gives her the side of Fiesta potatoes and says these are Mexican French fries. I almost cried laughing so hard. And in case you're curious, yes, we did report her for driving wasted. Sometimes it depends on the manager working, but we usually report all wasted drivers at Taco Bell. I hate to be that guy, but Taco Bell does actually serve French fries. It's those nacho fries or whatever they're called. I was giving tours at my college geology museum. An older woman asked me to show her around. I was showing her our best showpieces when we got to this large quartz crystal. She then proceeds to ooh and ah, and showed me that one of the facets of the peak had 7 edges. She then tells me that she could channel spirits through the crystal's facet and began speaking in tongues. I walked away and asked if anyone else would like a tour. In middle school, took a road trip with my best friend and her parents from the Midwest to Disney World in Florida. They had family in Georgia, so we stopped for a visit on our way through. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to enter their trailer because I was a northerner. They were eventually convinced to let me in when I told them that I was born in New Mexico, which wasn't a state during the Civil War, so therefore, I was technically not a northerner. It blows my mind that there are still people like this in America. While driving, I see windmills across the hilltops and point them out. My girlfriend, "Oh, cool! Why did they need to make wind though?" She's a special one. What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've ever seen? My roommate refused to go with his family for spring break since there wasn't a flight with first class seats and only business class was available. He ended up taking the connecting flight that did have first class available while the rest of his family just took business on the direct flight. You gotta be comfortable, you know, business class, the new cattle class. Wouldn't exactly call it rich kid syndrome, but it took me a little while to get used to my GF's lifestyle. I grew up in a very working class family, with both parents working full time just for us to stay afloat. Went around my GF's house and saw a lady making food in the kitchen. "You must be Mrs. Surname." Trying to be really polite, and I introduced myself to her family. That was actually their maid. It was awkward. Luckily, they're all really down to earth and stuff, cause turns out that her parents were basically homeless and living out of a storage space when they were my age. But her parents started up a little business and actually became really successful enough to support them. And they just kept growing. That makes sense. People who come from humble beginnings often turn out to become decent people when and if they get rich. The maid comment reminded me of this moment when I was traveling with my friends. For some context, I was the only Latino in the group of my mostly white friends, and on this trip we stayed at another friend's family's house. We woke up to an older Mexican woman cooking breakfast. She turned out to be their maid/cook, and this friend's mother said, "Oh my God, have you ever tried homemade tortillas? They are the best." My white friend slowly turns his head over to me, then back to the mom and says, "I'm pretty sure he has." I just smiled and she felt super embarrassed. It was a funny moment and she was super nice. The dude who relentlessly bullied me in school was also the son of one of the richest people in the city. One day a teacher caught him with his hands around my throat and I was pinned against a wall. We were both taken to the teacher's meeting room where it was explained to me that we should try to get along and that we should apologize to each other. Did I mention his dad also built the flashy new cafeteria for the school that year? He was caught on numerous occasions with me in some state of distress, and every time they found a way to make it both our problem. His dad pumped a lot of money into that school. He also flew his friends on his private airline to Manchester United games, so nobody stood up for me because they could lose their privileges. My saving grace was a lot of his mates in the early years of secondary school turned on him in the later years because he was such a jerk. But as you might tell, I'm still not over it. I feel this because I worked at a place that gave other people more chances than they deserved because that person knew people at the company. It's a crappy feeling when you get mistreated and no one has your back. Attended an international high school in Ho Chi Minh City where a lot of new wave millionaire kids live. The school was ridiculous, and a third of the kids were expats, perfectly lovely kids, and a third were local Vietnamese kids whose parents were working their butt offs to send them to this private school, and the other third were the millionaire kids. They would never hesitate to show off their mummy and daddy's wealth. They'd pull up to school in their Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc. And if their Rolls Royce didn't come on time to pick them up from school, it would be a straight phone call to their other driver to come pick me up right now. They'd be such jerks 24/7 to the non-rich locals and constantly just bring up the most trivial things and complain about them. I'm literally not exaggerating here when I say this example. My maid bought me the wrong Louis Vuitton bag. I told her it was the tan brown one, not the light brown one. Ugh, I can't believe it. Now we have to send her on the jet to Shanghai to get another one. They all paid and used family connections to get into Harvard, Stanford, UPenn, etc. And even now constantly complain on Facebook and Instagram about how crap their resident hall food was. So they just hired some freaking personal chef or something. Mind you, these kids were the dumbest bunch I've ever seen. One of them literally was so clueless about the most basic facts, but still got into business management. Despised the lot of them. Glad I'm in Europe, far away from most of them. When I was in high school, if you just had a car that worked, you were popular. Group of rich high school kids in Montana out driving around, drinking. Found 2 combines, large farm tractor thingies, worth about $250,000 each, out in a wheat field. Decided to have a demolition derby. Got caught in the judge's chambers with the farmers who just wanted the damages reimbursed. The high-end family lawyers asked what the hell they were thinking when they did that. The response? Well, you can't put a price on a good time. Turns out that was the wrong answer. Man, this story ended on a cliffhanger. Did they go to jail? Did their family end up paying? I get enough incomplete stories from my anime. I don't need it on Reddit too. He was 25 when I knew him. His father owned the oil fields. He had credit cards that he used for anything and everything, that they paid the balance off every month. He never even kept track of what was charged on it. He just bought whatever caught his fancy. He openly and shamelessly admitted that he had offered his college professors money to give him passing grades. One day he was cranky about something and said, "I wish my parents would just die so I could have their money. Why should I have to wait?" Sounds like his parents should find out how he really feels and leave him with just $1 in the will. Back in high school, we were doing one of those icebreakers where you passed the beach ball around and whoever caught it had to answer the question their thumb landed on. Well, this kid who had proclaimed being rich numerous times before, talking about his parents owning a known pizza place and how he drives expensive sports cars, caught the ball, and his question was, if you won $1 million, what would you do with it? His response was somewhere along the lines of, $1 million wouldn't make any difference in my life. Thanks a lot, Brad. You just ruined the game. Stupid Brad, always messing things up. I once had a mom ask if I could open the back of our ambulance so her kid could see what was inside since he wanted to be a fireman. I'm a medic, not a firefighter. I agree as long as he doesn't touch anything. Of course, the second the door opens, the kid hops in and goes straight for our expensive monitor. I tell him no, that it's dangerous and it could break, to which he starts screaming, "I don't care, my mom will buy it." And the mom says, "It's fine, just let him play with it. If it breaks, I'll replace it." I had to physically pick him up and carry him out of the ambulance since she didn't try to control him. While this is happening, we get paged out for a call and this lady suggests that she could pay double our hourly rate if we just stay for a few more minutes, just so her little punk could explore/destroy more of our equipment. Get the hell out of here with that crap, lady. You're willing to delay an ambulance so you won't have to deal with your precious little Joey's tantrum? Unbelievable. What would have been funny is if the kid used the shock panels and he flew out of the ambulance. A very distant relative of ours, some weird branch off the family tree, offered her son a bribe of an entire apartment building if he finished his undergraduate accounting degree. I just went, huh? So you get an immediate investment after graduating and you can rent out a place for mega dollars? My significant other has a rich aunt and uncle with only one kid. When he graduated college, his gift was a complex that brings in enough money for this kid to retire on. But if you ask him, he's self-made. I will never understand how rich kids can claim to be self-made. Maybe it's them just wanting to try and fit in. I don't know about rich, but just spoiled. My cousin insisted on a $15,000 wedding ring and a $30,000 wedding. She and the groom made $25,000 a year combined. Her dad paid for everything. They divorced within 6 months. Looks like she wanted a wedding, not a marriage. I have a kid in my MBA cohort that outsources his work and projects to India. He barked and moaned when one of our professors gave him a C when he only showed up to 2 classes after his dad donated $10,000 to the school. Overall nice guy, but doesn't have a clue. Had this one kid who dramatically threw down his smartphone on the ground in a mock frustration. Broken phone was replaced with few to no questions. I did that, but with an old flip phone so it didn't break. Got a few laughs when the battery flew out, and more when I picked it back up and it still worked. I chucked it halfway across the football field once, and that thing stayed intact. I went to middle/elementary school with some very wealthy people. Typically, I was oblivious enough to not realize it, but 2 instances come to mind. In 5th grade, we did an exchange trip type of thing with some kids in Canada. On the flight over there, one of the classmates said, "Wow, this is crazy. I've only ever flown first class before." Later, in 8th grade, I was at the same kid's house, an absolute mansion on top of a hill with the long landscaping entrance driveway, marbled floor entrance hall with stairs winding up either side, etc. And he and a girl, who had been dropped off in her dad's newer Ferrari, started having a discussion comparing the merits of their relatives' in-home movie theaters. Like, not just a living room with a cool AV setup, but full-on movie theaters with road seatings that could fit about 50 people. My family wasn't poor, but that was when I realized that we weren't rich either. I deliver pizzas in a very rich area. I'm talking seeing Rolls Royces and supercars on a daily basis kind of rich. My manager told me a story of someone that used to work there. This guy would deliver pizzas in a brand new BMW M3 and just put absolutely no effort into his job. Delivering pizzas isn't hard. Apparently this guy only had a job because his parents wouldn't pay his allowance if he didn't work. How much was his allowance, you ask? $5,000 a month. This guy was making $60,000 a year to deliver pizzas part-time. That's actually super common in wealthy families. An acquaintance of mine has the same deal with his parents. Work 40 hours a week and get $100,000 a year in allowance plus $15,000 a month for the mortgage being paid. Excuse me, $100,000 allowance? No wonder rich kids are out of touch. Brought my college roommate to my mom's house for Thanksgiving because he lived in a different state and I was only 15 minutes from campus. I gave him a quick tour of our house and he was astonished how clean it was. My mom's a neat freak and keeps a very clean house. He then said to my mom, "Wow, you guys must have a really good maid service." I've never seen my mom laugh that hard before. 2 girls, both nice and fairly level-headed, but also just raised too damn rich. One would take a taxi everywhere in town. It was a very safe small college town with the free campus buses, and she'd taxi across campus. She lived 2 blocks away from me and would take a taxi from her dorm to my house. Google Maps says it's a full 4-minute walk. She swore she had a terrible sense of direction and couldn't figure out where we lived. But you would think after that first embarrassingly short taxi ride, she'd throw on our address in Google Maps and just walk. The other would regularly complain about how not knowing how to manage their money. It took a while to figure out, but it eventually clicked that she meant very poor people didn't know how to invest their money in stocks and bonds. Then one day we were having a conversation where she revealed that she didn't think a house in Detroit in 2010 could possibly cost under $1 million. I told her I grew up in a nice $180K home and she thought I was dumb or lying. I shattered her world when I showed her my house on Zillow. When she graduated college, she complained about how much stuff cost all the time. It was nice seeing her learn the value of a dollar finally. What do you think made the second girl finally come around? Was it just enough times of colliding with the real world? Her parents stopped paying her way after she got a job. She was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in her first job, but she was living in Pasadena. She talked all the time about how poor she was and how she was living in an apartment above a garage. But at the time, I lived in an apartment with 5 other people and felt pretty wealthy, making $11 an hour. So I wasn't exactly heartbroken for her. Went to college with a totally chill dude who was apparently rich as freak. He was on our college golf team and enjoyed destroying a club if he hit a bad shot. He wasn't even angry, it was just like a reflex to go Bo Jackson over his knee or whatever. I asked him how he keeps playing and he basically said after every round he would just buy brand new clubs. He showed me in the trunk of his car that he had like 5 boxes of irons and always took the plastic off a new driver for every round. and he played every day at least 18 if not 36 holes. He said it wasn't even a rounding error in his dad's credit card. Jesus, I play golf and my golf clubs are really nice and custom fit to me, but that's because my dad is a PGA member and we get a sweet wholesale price. I can't imagine getting them replaced every day without it hurting, or even replacing them every year like some do. Kid in my high school crashed 6 cars within a year, and they weren't like 90s Toyotas and Hondas like most high schoolers have. These were brand new Subaru STIs, a BRZ, a BMW, brand new Jeep, stuff like that. The last car his dad bought him was a semi-new Ford Focus, a decent car, better than my 1997 white Camry. Every day he complained and threw a fit that his dad wouldn't buy him another $30,000+ car. Must be nice, I'm over here worrying about an oil leak on my car and the repair costs. I work with this guy. He recently proposed to a girl he dated for a few weeks with a $5,000 ring. He's 19 and we make less than $30,000 a year. They were married a month later. One of the kids in my grade bought bags of angel dust to senior prom. Not only did his parents let him go, the police did too. Now I believe he's in an engineering program at Yale. A kid that used to work for me came in work super pissed off one day. I asked him what was wrong, to which he replied, "My freaking maid didn't make my bed again, and my dad still won't fire her." I used to work for a family that had a cleaning lady every other day. None of the kids made their own beds, made their own food, washed their own dishes, hell, never even loaded a dishwasher. They just left them on the table for someone else to pick up. They had never done their own laundry either. When the son had football practice, I watched a teenage boy have a goddamn meltdown, sobbing and cursing about their maid for not throwing his uniform into the wash, and he didn't know how to do it himself. Their 2 oldest are about to have a very interesting freshman year in college. When I was in college, I roomed with a girl like this. Her mom did everything for her to the point where she couldn't function like a normal adult. Like her mom would drive 11 hours to clean this woman's room for her, clean up her used pee-pee wrappers, etc. Her mom would get really snarky with me like a self-reliance was a loser quality. Also because it made her daughter look bad. While it was really easy to learn to wash your own clothes, etc., she couldn't do it and just said, "Oh, well, I won't have to. When I graduate, I'm gonna get a high-paying job and have everything done for me. I wasn't raised to be a domestic like you." Fun fact, I wasn't raised that way. I did my own cooking and laundry because my mom couldn't bother to do anything but watch soap operas and Lifetime movies. Fast forward to present day, guess who couldn't hack taking care of herself after college and had to move back in with her mom? This was all of my college roommates. They couldn't do laundry, pick up after themselves, clean dishes, or make themselves a freaking sandwich. The ones whose parents lived close by, their mommies would come and clean up their room and do their laundry. Came back from a music festival in Southeast Asia, got VIP tickets. I swear, this isn't about me. One of the other festival goers is a 20-something-year-old Asian girl who looks like she's straight out of that movie Crazy Rich Asians. This chick had a photographer following her around snapping pictures or posing in front of the stage with various acts, getting in the way of other people trying to dance. She asked security if she could get them to clear a section for her so she could get an unobstructed view of the stage for better photos. She bought a couple of bottles, 6 in total, for her table and again had the photographer take incredible photos of her posing with the bottles. She was incredibly rude to the waitstaff, snapping her fingers and in general talking to them like they were lower class citizens. She asked my maid and I, both Westerners, to hang with her and her mates at her table, and again had the photographer take photos of her posing with us at the table. The other 2 guys from the group, both Asian, approached us when they saw that we were at this table, and it looked like we had made some new friends. When they approached us, the girl and her friends got quiet, spoke amongst themselves in Indonesian, and basically shooed them away. We went with them after they did that and walked over to our friends. One of the guys is Indonesian, and he told us that she basically told them to get lost and know their place. I can confirm that this definitely happens in Indonesia. I lived there for a number of years, and the racial and financial segregation is nothing like any other country or culture I know. I traveled there with a Filipino friend of mine. He looks Filipino and sounds and acts Aussie. He dresses very well. I dress very casually. In all of the stores we went into, if it wasn't apparent that we were traveling together, he would have the staff members follow him around. In one store, I was invited to try a $40,000 watch on. I let the staff members know I had no intention of making a purchase, but they insisted that I give it a try. He was told they do not allow people to try on watches. Interesting place. I know a girl who comes from a multi-million-dollar family. She's made several blog posts about how she and her significant other were broke, spent the year living really lavishly, and that they were going to end up on the street because there was no place to live available in their price range. And she genuinely wanted to end herself. Turns out what she meant is that there wasn't anywhere available above the normal rent rate. Ended up in a top floor penthouse. Guess daddy came through? Neither of them work. Man, this story just straight annoyed me. My boss bought her kids a $2 million house to live in while they went to college. My boss also paid for their college. So of course, they moved out of the $2 million house 5 months later because they wanted to be independent. Oh yeah, and expected mommy and daddy to pay for their rent, utilities, college, cars, vacations to see friends in different states, etc. I would just stay in the $2 million house. Maybe start a crayfish farm in the backyard to help pay for the house. Crayfish racers will pay a lot of money for a fast crawl, Dad. Crayfish racing reminds me of Filthy Frank. Friend in college literally went to the local GameStop at midnight every Tuesday. He'd buy every new release for every console. We went over to his house one time that year, and he had about 60-ish games that were unopened. One time we were walking around campus and he stopped by the ATM. He got his receipt and called his dad. Turns out his dad was worried his funds were running low, so he sent him $25,000 just to make sure he wasn't going to starve. Had a friend in high school whose dad wasn't involved. He was raised middle class like myself and lived with his mom and stepdad. After high school, he worked towards becoming an electrician and was saving for his first apartment. His dad eventually came around when he was right out of high school and started giving him money here and there when he needed it. His dad owned a large company on the East Coast and was a multi-millionaire. Soon his dad convinced him to quit his trade work and gave him a job at his business. Shortly after, he was promoted to a managerial position that he wasn't qualified for, and paid way too much. He'd just get wasted while on conference calls and nobody questioned him since he was the boss's son. His dad bought him his first home, almost $500,000, and multiple cars. He took up horse racing and we quickly had nothing in common. Gone were the days of dumb teenage stuff, going fishing, hiking, playing video games together. He quickly found a girlfriend whose dad was also a multimillionaire. She was 30 and still putting everything on daddy's credit card. I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle and very quickly we faded as friends. After his girlfriend and him broke up, she told me that he was actually severely depressed and almost drove his car off a bridge multiple times. Deep down, he was having issues with wanting to live up to his dad's lifestyle and standards, but losing his old friends in life. It's too bad, I haven't seen him in probably 4 years now. We tried to reconnect a few times, but it just doesn't work anymore. Man, that's really sad. It's like his dad wanted to make up for the neglect with money. It's stories like these that tell you that money corrupts people. It's like all those YouTubers that got famous when they were really young, and a lot of them have just disappeared now, because they're probably broke. Where were you when 9/11 happened? In the forest, camping, no radio, no phone. I came back to civilization 5 days later. Everyone had processed what happened, as much as you would expect. I had not even heard about it, so I was out of sync with the world. Strange times. Man, you must have found a portal out there and accidentally traveled to a bad timeline. There's a really good podcast called 9/12, which is all about how we as a society reacted to 9/11. And one of the stories they tell is about people who were on a boat in the middle of the ocean filming some reality show. It sounds like your experience was very similar to those people. If I'm not mistaken, I think the MTV show The Real World was being filmed during 9/11 as well. I remember them giving them TVs to watch because the show usually didn't allow TVs and stuff in the house. Getting ready to pick up relatives at the airport in preparation for our wedding. How was the airport scene? Oh, their planes were grounded mid-flight. The wedding was canceled. I was pretty young during 9/11, so I wasn't a traveler at that point, but I did have some flights canceled at the start of C-19, and I remember it being a weird feeling. I can only imagine how it felt during 9/11. Under anesthesia at the Boston Children's Hospital, I woke up being moved into an elevator on a gurney. They had finished my surgery, but weren't bringing me to the recovery ward. Boston's Children's Hospital is a very tall building, and Boston had advised all buildings to evacuate all the floors above the 10th floor. So I was moved down to a lobby after my surgery. That's gotta be wild, going under in one reality and waking up in another. That's pretty much like anytime something happens during the night. That last statement is super true. My most recent experience with that was waking up in America and hearing about the earthquakes in Turkey. Not something anyone should have to wake up to. I was sleeping during the first plane, getting ready for work when the second hit. Went to work for 3 hours with no customers. Called the boss, he said close, and went home. Watched CNN and tried to convince my mom that I wasn't about to get drafted. Same, but in high school. Sleeping for the first plane, when waking up to my parents being like, what is going on? Saw the second plane hit. Went to school anyways. We spent all day in every class just watching the news. Sitting on our desks, on the floor, pacing around, just crawling in our own skins. Teachers and students alike. They let us ask questions and express our feelings to the best of everyone's abilities. Lunch period was surreal. There was silence. Not a single plane in the sky. Got in the car, turned on music, and then turned it off immediately. It felt disrespectful. Whatever fast food we got that day was just eaten in silence. So gut-wrenching. Remember it like it was yesterday. Similar, my brother was a truck driver and happened to be in New York State at the time. He called my dad at home. I watched the second plane hit live. I did go to school afterwards, but it was an odd day. I'm in Canada on the border with New York State, so we were glued to CNN. I vaguely remember seeing F-18s flying. I remember sitting in the library watching the news just talking about the events. My brother was stranded in the States for a week or so because the borders were closed. It was long enough over here in Australia. I had an American friend on the internet mention the first plane hit, promoting me to go and turn on the late night news. A few minutes after I started watching, the second plane hit live on TV. Before that, everyone still thought it must have been an accident. But when the second plane hit, we all knew what it meant. This was me at my school. The teachers turned on the news for about a minute before the second plane hit, so my homeroom class saw it happen. After that, the principal got on the PA and said to turn off all the TVs and go about the day as naturally as possible. I was mad when they did that. One of the biggest breaking news events in our lifetime, and they weren't letting us watch it because they were worried that we were scared. I was already scared, and keeping me in the dark made it worse. This must have been a tough situation for adults. I mean, I totally understand wanting to protect children from that madness. It's easily a traumatic experience. On the R train that just passed underneath the towers in Cortlandt Street, the conductor of the R train after mine was instructed to go straight through and not stop. They disobeyed that order and stopped, took on as many people as possible and got out of there. That conductor likely saved a lot of lives. There's almost no mention of that anywhere in the news. Oh my god, that's crazy. Incredibly heroic on their part. I was in Manhattan, watched the towers fall, heard the crowds that had gathered all down Fifth Avenue gasp and scream in unison as the first tower crumbled. Gathered in a packed bar with freaked out coworkers as we first saw the photo of Osama bin Laden on TV. Walked home to Queens with thousands of other shocked New Yorkers in eerie silence, with the occasional ghostly figure of a downtown worker covered in white dust. My ex-wife was in the second tower, got out when the first one was hit. Her brother was in the first tower. Luckily, he also got out. She was knocked down by the concussion of the tower falling. Some stranger picked her up by her elbows. It was her brother. She also had a few other heartwarming tidbits. As she walked home to Brooklyn, she had been breaking in new heels, and some dude in a corner store gave her a pair of flip-flops. They broke 3 blocks later, giving her her first post-9/11 laugh. She still has them today in her hope chest. She also said that people were turning radios to the streets, so she could get a running commentary about potential other attacks, and others were handing out bottles of water to newly minted pedestrian commuters. New Yorkers, man, complete jerks if you're in their way during rush hour. But if you yell help, the whole freaking city comes running. My kind of people. Came home from school. I was in the UK, age 12, with my mom watching it in her office on the 14-inch CRT television/VHS combo. Watched the second one hit. I remember saying, freaking hell, and for once not being told off for it. I have a similar story. I was 8 and also in the UK at the time. I used to go to a friend's house after school and get picked up by my mom after she finished work. I distinctly remember getting in trouble for calling the pilot a silly bastard for flying the plane into a building. I don't think anyone understood the magnitude of the situation at that point. Yeah, that's what I thought when the first plane hit. Some stupid idiot approaching the airport far too low. Then, oh god, this is deliberate, when the second plane hit. Then we got the news of the other planes and I was like, is the US being invaded? I was at home on the other side of the world trying to watch cartoons and being annoyed why I couldn't. I was 8 at the time. Same, 8-year-old Australian here, was totally mad that Pokemon wasn't on that morning. My parents had to sit me down and talk me through the tragedy that had just happened. I remember feeling sad, but also a little mad about missing Pokemon. I was in my mid-20s at the time and on the internet, when a friend in the US told me about the first plane impact. I turned on the late-night CNN feed. Channel 7 used to run it instead of infomercials. I don't remember for sure, but I think it was about 1 a.m. Melbourne time. I woke up my wife and told her I had just saw the start of World War III, and she said, "Huh? What? I'll just read about it in the morning," and went back to sleep. The next morning, she woke up and said, "Holy crap, you were serious?" That's how I feel when anyone tells me anything while I'm half asleep. I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11 because I worked across the street. I was at the base of the South Tower when I saw the second plane go into the building, and I ran away toward the South Street Seaport. It had a huge impact on my life and still does, but I met the love of my life because of it, and now we have a son. I was thinking about it today because New York Magazine did a profile on us on Valentine's Day of 2002 and called it Love After 9/11. There was a lot of coverage after 9/11 on how many surviving firefighters ended up leaving their wives for the widows of their dead colleagues in the years after. Basically, they would be consoling the widows and form a bond over their shared grief. Strange effects of a terrible day. Trauma bonding is a real thing. If you've never heard of it, look it up. I was in the restaurant business at the time. Woke up to start getting ready to go to wine tasting at Windows of the World at 1 p.m., top floor of the North Tower. Then I turned on the TV. I had taken the evening class about 6 months earlier. If you worked at WOW, I'm sorry for the loss of your coworkers. Heather was a really amazing pastry chef. Wow, this imparts a strange feeling. For you to know and share the name of someone who passed away as the result of the attacks, it immediately humanizes it and makes it more personal instead of a thing that happened. Third day of high school in Long Island. Every TV was turned on around 8:50 a.m. My fourth period global teacher ran out of the class when the first tower fell. My sequential 2 math teacher still gave us a quiz that day. Kid behind me was crying the whole time. His parents worked at the World Trade Center. Never saw him again the following day. That next day, they sent the freshman class on a retreat to meet their fellow classmates, as we previously planned. It was quiet the whole time. In case anyone was curious, I don't remember the kid's name, and I'm pretty sure he lost both parents that day and already knew that they were gone. And he had told the math teacher, who was Mrs. Clean. So yes, she gave us the quiz and him with the possible knowledge of his parents being gone. My high school locked down, and they wouldn't tell us what happened until later in the day. It sucked because it made the whole day strange. Mine also locked down. I was 1 week into the 10th grade studying for my math class. That teacher said, "F that, this is history," and wheeled in a TV to the center of the board and turned it on. I stayed in that class for the next 3 periods. I often squatted in his room with some other people, until I got picked up. He still goes down as my favorite teacher. I was in college and my art history professor gave us a test that day. It was at 11 a.m. and all I remember is all of us sitting there just blinking and looking around. I was a sophomore, and someone asked our anthropology professor to turn on the TV. That was already in the classroom, so we could try to understand what was going on. She refused, but none of us really understood what was happening at that point. I had to watch the second plane hit while having breakfast at the main cafeteria a bit later. The TV was very smallish and attached to the wall where it met the ceiling, and it was always on mute. I remember that no one could get cell phone service all day. Aside from the usual contingent of future hipsters, most of the student body had cell phones, but they weren't at all the means of rapid information they are now. Man, I'm old. I don't think I had a cell phone during 9/11, but I think I remember hearing about how phone lines weren't working. Working at a bakery listening to the radio. I was 21. It reminded me of the War of the Worlds broadcast that I learned about in history class. I still wasn't sure it was real until I got home and saw it for myself. Driving to Rutgers University, about 30 miles from New York City, seeing a giant plume of smoke coming up and not realizing what it was from. I got to campus and was told classes were canceled and we were under attack. I had just woke up, turned on the radio, heard the DJ talking about the first plane hitting, then watched the second plane hit live on TV. I was on a plane halfway over the Atlantic from Germany going back to the US. The plane had to turn around and go back to Germany. I was 10 months old. I still have the passport with my 9/11/01 stamp on it. Wow, there's an amazing documentary about the emergency landings that had to take place at the airport in Canada because of the hijackings. It's an interesting story, but I'm glad your family was able to go back instead of having to deal with that. I was working in downtown Ottawa, Canada, for those that don't know, in a skyscraper when it came on the news after the first plane hit. I remember the first news saying that they thought it was a news helicopter that had accidentally hit one of the towers. I went to one of our boardrooms and saw the second tower hit live on TV on one of our massive projector screens. We were told to go home at some point after the news of other planes started coming down. Leaving our building and traveling through downtown was intense. We knew planes were being diverted, we didn't know if we were under attack too. I was 1 block away from Parliament Hill, and the streets were filled with military and heavily armed police vehicles. I also saw people jumping and the towers fall while it was being recorded live. Even though I wasn't in New York City, It was still an event experienced in real time. Some years, on September 11th, it hits harder for some reason. I was in the 5th grade, 5th floor math class, looking out the window like usual at the Manhattan skyline from our school in Queens. We didn't see the first plane hit, but we did see the smoke, and we pointed it out to our teacher and said that must be some kind of fire. I remember thinking, how the heck were the firemen going to spray water all the way to the top? Teacher next door came in and told our math teacher to turn on the radio. When the second plane hit, the radio went off, and soon after we were all called to the lunchroom. Some of the kids' names were called, and they were pulled to go to the principal's office afterwards. I found out that their parents had worked in the towers. It was very surreal not knowing what was going on and the teachers all huddling together whispering amongst themselves. After a few hours, they let us go home, and I ran home across the street and made it to the 5th floor apartment asking my mom what was going on, and if I could go to the roof and look at the skyline. I went up there by myself, and it was the weirdest view I'd ever seen. The towers weren't there anymore. I stayed there for what felt like the rest of the day just looking at the smoke, and fighter jets flying above me towards Manhattan. School days for the next few months were weird. We were like in this limbo where all we had to do was have positive talks about America and make "United we stand, divided we fall" posters to hang around town. But there was always an underlying feeling of hurt and sadness. Those were some strange days. At the exact moment, sleeping. I was in California, so I was still asleep at the time. I was in college and I overslept that day. Woke up and was in a rush to get to my first class. My roommate at the time was trying to show me something on TV that morning, but I was in so much of a rush I didn't pay attention to him and left for class. In the car, I had a CD playing. If I had the radio on, I probably would have heard it there. When I got to school, the parking lot was usually full, and running late meant you wouldn't be able to find a parking spot. But it was almost empty, and I was able to get a parking spot right up in front of the school. I should have known something was off, but I was just happy to be getting a good parking spot. I rushed to class, and when I got there, this class that usually had 50 students normally had about a half dozen people there. I said, "What's going on? Where is everybody?" That's when I finally found out what happened. The internet was a thing, and some people did have cell phones, but there wasn't constant communication like there is now, so I was able to go the whole morning without knowing. I was also in college and late for class that day, but still living at home. Flicked on the light bulb and it burned out. Went downstairs to get a new one and said, "Hey mom, the light burned out." And she said, "This is honestly the worst thing I've ever seen or heard." I was like, "Don't worry, I'm changing it now." 10 minutes later, idiot me figured out what she meant. She had saw the second plane hit. I remember for years waiting for things to settle down and get back to normal, and it just never did. So this is a genuine question. I was born in 2002 and always hear about people saying things never got back to normal after 9/11. But what changed? I realize airport security is very different now, but beyond that, I've never been able to grasp what people were talking about. Was it similar to the pandemic where it was just a fundamental culture shift that can't really be articulated? Or was it something more tangible than that? Well, this is my opinion as a Gen Xer, 1967. There was this aura of invincibility. The US takes the fight to you, and no one ever came to our house and picked a fight with America. The closest thing was Pearl Harbor, and you saw how things turned out for Japan. So don't even think about it. In that one act, America was no longer invincible. Also, it wasn't a country who did it, but a group of secret extremists. We were attacked by a ghost. The US was vulnerable to a ragtag group of misfits. What if a country with resources wanted to do us harm? We're screwed. This sense of and projection of invincibility has never returned. I was taught in school the US is a melting pot of individuals. We're all different individuals. But you come to America, assimilate, and melt into the big happy family called America. Middle Easterns who immigrated to America were perceived as rejections of their country's cultures and ideologies in favor of becoming more westernized. That mindset of welcoming and acceptance of foreigners flipped immediately. The hijackers, who were foreigners, lived amongst us for months and years. Immediately, there was a huge distrust of Middle Easterners. This has not changed for a lot of Americans and has given a rise to this plague of nationalism you see now. Also, the heightened airport security and the US government's surveillance of its citizens in the name of national security flies in the face of this notion America is the freest country on earth. Additionally, there was this huge amount of propaganda that said, as a patriotic American, if you see something suspicious, say something to authorities. This sense of true freedom has never returned, and we're all on the outlook to report something suspicious. I believe this has morphed into Karens reporting suspicious people, aka minorities, in their neighborhoods. There's probably more. These are the biggest changes I've seen from 9/11, and there's no denying that there was a ripple effect after. Celebrating my 17th birthday. This was in Colorado, so the news broke right after I left for school. I got flowers and cards from friends, and we hung out before class started. Then I went to first period. We had a sub and she opened the class with the news. She let us watch it on TV, and by that point, both towers had already been hit. I was kind of just half doing my assignments and checking the TV. I distinctly remember looking up after the first tower collapsed and said, dumbfounded, "Where's the other one?" Every class had the news on, and we obviously didn't do anything else that day. Then I went home and we didn't really know what to do. Nobody felt like celebrating, but my grandparents were there, so I decided to at least open gifts. At the time, shirts with cityscapes were trendy. They were black with the skyline and silver glitter. I pointed out one or two mentions that they could be a cool birthday gift. I opened one box, and staring back at me is one of the shirts I liked. It was the World Trade Center. We all stared in horrified silence, and I just put it down and sat there for a moment. Canadian here. I was just dropping my girlfriend off to class, and I heard about it on the CBC. I got home to see the replay of the second plane hit. I was driving on the South Street by the Dahl residence in Halifax when I heard it. I will never forget that day or that moment. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a joke too. I was in the 4th grade at the time. As I remember it, it was just a normal day. Nothing odd going on at school in the morning. A classmate, her mother babysat me from time to time, went home for lunch. When she came back to school, she said something about how planes had hit a tower in the US. I don't remember anything out of the ordinary that afternoon at school, but all I could think about is how outrageous of a story that was. I didn't like her much. She lied all the time too. I remember after my dad came in to pick me up to take me home, I put it on TV, getting ready to watch The Simpsons and wait for dinner. But The Simpsons weren't on. All it was on almost every channel was the news about what had happened. And at that moment I was like, oh my god, she wasn't lying. Was still mad The Simpsons weren't on, but I ended up not sleeping that night. I was asleep at my parents' house. My mom came in and woke me up. She was upset. She wouldn't tell me what it was at first. She made me get up and see it on TV. I still had to go to work that day at Walmart, but there wasn't anybody shopping. I was 18, fresh out of high school. I remember thinking, among other things, that we were about to go to war, and I would probably get drafted. So I figured why not end this video with my own personal story where I was during 9/11. I was in the 8th grade, and I had just gotten to my dyslexia class. This class only had like 6 students in it, and we were pretty cool with the teacher. Well, we thought it was going to be a normal goof around day when one of my classmates, a big guy, we will call him Jimmy, comes walking into the class and says, "Did you guys see? A plane crashed into a building." We all responded like, "What are you talking about, Jimmy?" He then said, "Yeah, look, turn on the TV, it's on the news." So my teacher lets us turn on the TV we had in the classroom, and we just sat there and watched the news coverage of the planes crashing into the towers. Now, I won't sit here and say I understood the gravity of the situation at the time. I was in middle school. All I cared about was video games, girls, and TV. I finished the rest of the day, but so many kids were taken out of class by their families. I remember going home and every channel just covering the attacks. I think only kids channels like Nickelodeon continued playing their regular programming. I was really into MTV at the time, and even they were covering the attacks. I might be mistaken. I remember trying to change the channel and my brother getting super pissed at me the next morning, said I was being disrespectful or something along those lines. I remember my mom getting after him and saying something like, "Don't get mad at him, just let him be a kid." Kind of her way of shielding me from the madness of what was going on. After that, I just remember the world felt different. America was no longer this place that felt safe or awesome. This might have been the first time I noticed hate in the world, because as many know, people from the Middle East during this time got treated differently. It was horrible. But on the other side of the coin, it was also the one time that America felt united. Everyone was on board with getting justice for what happened. Kinda surreal when you compare 9/11 to how Americans treat each other today. 9/11 changed how America saw the world, in my opinion. I also think it reminded a lot of people that life is fragile, and you should appreciate every moment you got, because you never know when it's gonna be your last. Ugly dudes with hot wives. How did you do it? By being hot when I was younger. I've aged horribly while my wife has aged like fine wine. I feel you. My last 3 years, I've aged like 10 years. I've avoided aging for so long. My wife keeps getting prettier. Men also don't do the daily upkeep that most straight women do. That could account for it. I laughed at that last comment because it seems like that person thinks that gay women don't have a skin routine. Hell, I've seen gay men with better skin than some women. Smoke and mirrors. She thinks I'm hot, but it's all confidence and superficial charm. It's been 21 years and I've been white knuckling this whole relationship hoping she doesn't notice that I'm a fat dork. I stalked your profile. You're a pretty handsome dude. Nice beard, man. You and your wife look great together. Thanks, she's got a banging body and puts her right out of my league, but she won't let me post those pics as proof. I think Pete Davidson has shown everyone that looks don't matter when it comes to getting women. And that's not me talking crap. He has a joke about it. I believe my wife is damn near blind. Wow, this has actually never really occurred to me, but my best relationship I ever had was with a gal who was just shy of being legally blind. I've never really thought about it much. Pretty much been single ever since. Time for you to start hanging out in the Braille section of the library, my dude. My wife has no depth perception and has pretty bad eyesight. The only logical reason is because she can't see me. Now get out of my swamp. In your pictures, I see someone with a lively face and laughing eyes. You look kind enough and your comment tells me you're very humorous. The picture you chose of her and your comment both tell me that you're caring and appreciative towards her. I think you all overestimate the importance of socially accepted good looks. I admit that being actively ugly might be a hindrance, but otherwise it's not really that important. As they say, good looks get you in the door, personality makes them stay and happy. I like to think of it like this. Good looks matter for a lot of hookups, but for actual relationships, personality is far more important. Six-pack abs don't matter as much as good communication skills, the ability to stay calm under pressure, and the willingness to compromise with your partner. I wholeheartedly agree with that last comment. Good-looking people destroy when it comes to the dating scene, but ask them how many good or healthy relationships they've had. If you need more evidence, just look at Hollywood relationships. My wife has terrible taste. If I'm being honest, my wife's gotten hotter over the last 25 years, and I've gotten old. I think her secret is a great skincare routine, exercise, and good genes. I was in high school when that whole Wear Sunscreen song came out in the late 90s. I took that song to heart, wore it every day, and I'm now in my 40s. I'm glad I did. I make her laugh and give great hugs. Great hugs are such an underrated skill. I have a girthy, and I mean massively good sense of humor. Just reading that made me wet, because I snorted while drinking. I blew a load of my coffee all over the table. These comments were small, but they got the job done. My wife told me I have a great sense of humor and can always brighten her day with it. She also said that I really listen to her when we talk. I definitely married up. I actually don't know. It can't be money because my job is one of the worst paying jobs in our country. It's something like 98.5% of full-time jobs make more than mine. And it can't be because of having a huge member, because mine is way below average. If I had to guess, maybe it's because I'm funny, like I think that I'm honest, like way too honest. I don't make much money and have an average PP. Quotes from a man you can trust. You pay attention to the bits other men don't typically pay attention to. My wife last week. She told me to say that I know the motion of the ocean, but as a real answer, I pay attention to the small things. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. We have good communication. I try my best to make her feel loved. I never pressure her into anything, and we encourage each other to keep improving. If we fight, we resolve it pretty quickly, because we're both able to apologize and recognize our faults. It's just about being able to say, hey, I love you and I want to talk this through because I know that we can figure it out together. We've probably had 2 or 3 big fights in our relationship, but we've always sat down and talked about it, warts and all. Spoken like a man that knows the meaning of a relationship. My friend is a short, overweight, dwarven-looking man and has a really hot girlfriend. It's all charisma. I used to run with a guy like that too. He was about 5'6" and over 200 pounds, so short and pudgy. He made okay money, but certainly wasn't rich. Yet he was always with someone you would consider to be way out of his league. How did he manage it? I figure he had 2 things going for him. 1, the guy was genuinely funny. If you're hanging around with this guy, he will keep you laughing nonstop. And 2, confidence. He'll talk to anyone, and if you shoot him down, he'll just chat up your friend without missing a beat. This kind of describes me, but also you would be surprised. There's plenty of women, like my GF, who find short, overweight, dwarven-looking men very attractive. My GF is taller than me and rubs my hairy belly in bed just like I'm a king. And she's quite hot. I like men of all heights, but my ex-husband was shorter than me and my current partner is only a little taller than me. I don't understand the need to have a large, tall man. I'm not looking for a father figure. Lots of wonderful men get overlooked because of this. There's gold in them hills out there, ladies. Part of me feels like this post was made by hobbits. Got a short, overweight, balding friend. We literally call him George Costanza. He's just confident, enthusiastic, and always doing something because he takes his hobbies seriously. His girlfriend seems the opposite, even though she's a smoke show. So it was partly a lucky find, but he also clearly adds substance to anyone's life he's in. He also comes from a very wealthy family, if you need that information. I feel like the wealthy family info is a double-edged sword because on one hand, people will automatically think, oh, she's a gold digger. But then on the other hand, it sucks for those women that are genuinely into a person and not for the money. They get overlooked. How men make us feel while we're in their presence is crucial. Sometimes by virtue of the fact that the guy showing you the attention is hot, you'll feel attractive simply because logic dictates that he could exclusively be chatting up hot women if he wants to be. So he must think you're hot. That rush of emotion wears off real quick if he's got absolutely nothing going on apart from his looks. Doubly fast if he's an arrogant jerk. As multiple people are and have always been saying, if you make us laugh and are pleasant, you're going to make us feel like the most beautiful, captivating woman in the room. That's not a high we want to come down from. Make them laugh, treat them well. Do fun stuff together, do chores, admit when you're wrong, give compliments without prompting, learn what they do and don't like. Then put that knowledge to work. Have a handle on your own psychology so you can deal with your own business. Listen twice as much as you talk. This is true. I spent an hour talking to my husband about a book I finished today. I know he wasn't completely interested, but he listened, asked questions, and was engaged. It's the sexiest thing in the world that he cares enough about me just to let me ramble and poorly explain why I love this book. I won't lie to you, when I can have a deep, thoughtful conversation with a woman, it is one of the sexiest things in the world. You know those guys who brag about finishing a pudding cup without a spoon? Well, I can clean out a peanut butter jar. No idea why he's so successful with the ladies, he says, sitting at the end of the bar licking his eyebrows. Let me tell you guys, you're gonna wanna start off like a butterfly landing on a flower and finish like a bulldog eating oatmeal. I like oatmeal. I'm not ugly, but I got a woman way hotter than me to marry me. Turns out, if you have a good personality and are slightly interesting, then you can get away with being a 5. But, the internet tells me that women only want alpha bros with muscles and money that make their bed every morning. Wait a minute. Do we really think that alpha bros make their bed every morning? Unless we think all alpha males are the American Psycho type. I'll give my perspective from the other side. My boyfriend isn't classically handsome. His hairline is receding and the man is a beanpole and somewhat effeminate. Exactly who Andrew Tate claims will never get a woman. But I'm obsessed with him and I'm so glad and proud that he's mine. Why is that? He listens when I talk. He cleans up after himself. He's funny and insightful and above all, kind. He cooks, he's terrible at it, but he tries hard. He's like the most gentle man I've ever met, and because of that, I don't feel the fear I've felt around most other men in my life. My cats love him, he feeds me, he apologizes when he's wrong, and I feel secure enough to admit when I'm wrong too. We talk out every problem as a us versus the problem instead of a me versus him. He gives me space when I need it, and attention when I need it too. We just respect each other. Those things aren't hard, but he's the first to check all those boxes. He's 100 out of 10 for me, and I'll grow old and die happily with him. I'll add on to this. My husband is more than a decade older than I am. He has a receding hairline when we met and was working 2 jobs. Our sense of humor is the same, so is our sense of justice. Our dark sides match, and he's great at housework. Then came the hookups. Oh my god, we matched there too. It was over for me. I fell in love. It's still those same qualities that make every day happy and full of laughter. You can't survive the pitfalls of life without being able to laugh. Beauty fades, hair falls out, and wrinkles form. Let's keep spreading the love for good men. My fiance is average to everyone but me. He's overweight, goofy, awkward, and kinda dumb. I say this lovingly, I'm also dumb. Think of the last 2 brain cells meme? That's us. He also makes me laugh every single day. Our childlike qualities align perfectly to keep us happy and well maintained. So we can be goofy idiots all day with each other, and it's fantastic. He embraces my mean streak that comes out playfully, to its full extent, so I can be a little brat. Every flaw I see in myself, he sees as a beauty. He also knows how to handle my mood swings and be so gentle with me on my bad days. He doesn't need to be mothered like many men, loves providing for me, as I do him, and is as sweet as candy. I can't wait to marry him. My husband has been balding since the day we met and it's never bothered me. But damn, he's funny. I made a little joke about a very shocked looking cinder block and he ran with it. We giggled in the car like school kids over a fart. We're both over 30. I have about an extra 20 to 30 pounds and he has a little bit more than that. But when he comes home and hugs me, it's all warm and safe. I've always been one of those guys where people are like, dude, how did you get her? I'm super tall, which probably helps, but I've always been overweight. I'm not exactly sloth. Look up the Goonies, youngsters, you're welcome. But I'm not Marlon Brando either. I'm highly average looking. I do pretty well financially, but you wouldn't know that if you looked at me, my truck, or home, and when I got my wife, I was broke AF. I always tell them that it isn't that hard. Treat them like people you value and respect. listen to them, take an interest in them and the things that are important to them. Put in some genuine effort and show them you care. It's easier and more effective to constantly do little things to show her how you care than always trying to prove it with some big gesture. Then just take care of yourself. Good hygiene, keep your house and ride clean, have a couple of genuine interests and hobbies. It makes you more interesting and a well-rounded person. Learn to cook. No woman wants a man-child who can't properly feed himself, and I've not met a woman yet that doesn't like a man that can cook. I personally would like to add, don't listen to douchebags. Andrew Tate is the latest one of these, but there's always some popular famous one at any given time. My husband and I met in college. What made me choose him over more conventionally attractive men who were interested in me at the time? He was extremely honest. When we talked, he listened and responded not in a way to try to get with me, but in a way you listen and respond to your best friend. And that's how I knew it was genuine. I don't know how, but I can tell when a guy is trying to prove that he's a good listener for flirty reasons versus actually connecting through the listening. This made me feel so safe and respected. I knew something was different about him. Our very first conversation was about philosophy. By the way, today we've been married for a decade now, and we absolutely laugh like kids together every single day. It sounds stupid, but Bumble. He was from the next town over. I wouldn't normally have talked to him because he didn't put anything on his profile or really fill it out. But something about him seemed kind of like, I don't know, genuine or sweet? I don't know how to explain it. He just turned out to be a bit shy, so it's hard for him to talk about himself to strangers. I'm glad I gave it a shot though. Opposite side here, ugly chick with handsome dude. I let him touch my chesticles. Works 100% of the time. My homie was a nice dude, spent 6 years third wheeling for the fun of it, but in the end glad to see he got married. He said all he did was be funny and things went over time. I feel like the waiting game advice can be bad advice for most men. It's probably better to let your feelings known instead of waiting 6 years and then possibly getting rejected. It being Valentine's Day and all, when my boyfriend and I found each other online, he would make any excuse not to video chat with me. We exchanged pics, he only had 2, but I felt it was necessary to see each other live before meeting. Pics don't show the true person. I was mainly thinking of safety and I was about to bail on him. He sweetly convinced me to be patient and wait to meet in person. I asked why. I thought he was a serial killer or something. He assured me that he wasn't. He simply didn't want my first impression of him to be on video chat. Cautiously, I decided to be patient. We proceeded to text and call each other every day for the next 2 weeks. The texts became love letters and the calls were exciting. I got to know him on a much deeper level, and I thought his voice was so sexy. He made me laugh and he was thoughtful. He was also very kind-hearted, but also very masculine, which I love. He exuded confidence. The chemistry was off the charts. The laughter was constant. When we met for the first time, it didn't matter what he looked like. He was not traditionally handsome by society standards. He was a little overweight, bald, and a bit hunched over. But I think he's gorgeous. He knew exactly what he could offer me and navigated our meeting to allow us to fall in love. Some might think that he was perhaps hiding, but we could have missed out on great love. He is the love of my life. Sometimes he jokes and asks what I see in him, and he calls himself ugly. I remind him of our love story and he smiles. I also remind him that I think he's hot AF. I plan on being his wife one day, because he's the love of my life. Well, it certainly wasn't my pee-pee size or money. Neither of those are worth bragging about. I treated her like a good friend, not an object of infatuation. That caught her attention. I got her to fall in love with me by proving to be well-rounded in my life and very capable. As Red Green would say, if the woman don't find you handsome, make sure they find you handy. Have a sense of humor, especially about yourself, and be comfortable laughing. Listen, clean the house, be kind to animals and service workers. The bar is incredibly, and I mean staggeringly, low. I'm not an ugly guy per se, but I'm stone cold average at best. I'm totally forgettable, but my wife is hot. She's actually attracting attention. She's the kind of woman that men buy things for out of the blue. I listen to her, I share chores with her, I take care of her, I encourage her to do things that make her happy. I spend time with her, and I show interest in the things that she has interest in. Wait, guys are buying things for your wife out of the blue? Yep, she was at the mall with her mother one day, and the guy in line behind her bought her food. A couple of times last year, she had guys at the water park buying her soft drinks. Once she was watching the kids at the pool on vacation, a guy bought popsicles for the kids, shot daggers at me when I walked up and sat beside her. I've long lost count of how many drinks have been bought for her at bars, even once when they realized I was there. Stuff like that. Don't get me started on how often guys come up and just chat with her. Shout out to this guy for just rolling with the punches. I know so many jerks that would get mad at their girls because they're too attractive. Complete idiots. I load the dishwasher instead of leaving my crap in the sink. She finds it hot as hell. I can lick my eyebrows. To be honest, very attractive women sometimes get less attention than you'd think, because guys think that they're just out of their league or something. So the first step to dating anyone is actually putting yourself out there and asking. Nothing's foolproof, but you'd be surprised at the results sometimes, since a lot of guys just self-reject out of being a contender because they don't think they have a shot. That's a huge piece of advice that I've gotten from some more charismatic friends. If you're interested in someone, don't reject yourself. I can honestly say I have objectively the most attractive wife out of my friend group. I was also the one who had no fear at all of rejection. And practice helps to get over those fears. Friend told me back in the day that I went on far more dates than anyone he knew or ever heard of. It doesn't guarantee that the person you fall in love with will be great looking, but if you never talk to anyone, them odds are zero. In regards to the don't reject yourself comment, take that a step further and apply it to everything in life. It will be a huge benefit, trust me. As a longtime restaurant employee, I believe I've seen many cooks and dishwashers unlock the secret. Feed them and agree when they're mad at someone. Honestly, the weight of my heart is definitely through my stomach. My wife is very shy and reserved. I think I was just the only guy that didn't scare her off. I hit the perfect balance of pursuing her and giving her space. Like feeding a wild cat. Until I eventually lured her to a church by the altar. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and her glasses prescription wasn't up to date. Guys that have never been with an attractive woman, and probably not many women in general, will say money. Guys that have been with attractive partners, being funny, treat women with respect, being a decent human being, that's what they do. Yeah, I can confirm, I know plenty of guys that don't have money that have gotten plenty of women. I love these threads because every woman in here is like, he's super nice, he's kind, loves dogs and kids and tips at the restaurant, has a passion for insert benign hobby here, and takes things in stride. He doesn't have a fragile ego and isn't insecure. Just be chill and girls will like you because you aren't dangerous and a liability prone to violence. And the guys in this thread are like, ugh, must be rich, must have a huge wiener. I just have no idea what else it could be because women lie so much and just aren't smart enough to know what they really want. It happens every time. I am very lucky that she was super interested in me from the start. I was just too stupid to notice at first. All worked out in the end, I'm still extremely happy with her. I was just myself and I kept being myself, and that is the key. I see guys pretending to be someone they're not, and that is a big mistake, man. I do think many men overthink that they need to be someone to attract women. At the end of the day, do you want an attractive girlfriend, or do you want someone that'll accept you for who you are? If you just be yourself, you might get both. Be good at cooking, your job, and just generally being good at social functions you both agree with. It's called communication. The ways you're good at these things can vary, but generally people are looking, hopefully, for someone who complements your weaknesses, appreciates your strengths, and you can genuinely be at your most comfortable with. My source? Been with my wife for 15 years from ages 21 to 36. My fiance is absolutely stunning, and to be honest, I'm like medium ugly, but I made her laugh like no other man could hope to, and just treated her well and respected her. I've learned to realize that hot women care more about personality than average looking women. I was a late bloomer, went from a 4 on a good day to a 7 or maybe an 8 thanks to genetics and heavy lifting. We get handsome, but holy hell does it not start that way. I met my wife when I was in my early 20s. She was 19. She was one of those girls that just glows, insanely gorgeous. During our first date, I was absolutely certain she was going to just get up and leave. She didn't. After a few days, I asked her why she hadn't run away yet. She said, "I like you for you." She surprised me at work one day by bringing lunch for a picnic, and several of my coworkers said, "How the hell did you land her?" It wasn't money, although I do have a solid career and decent money. In 10 years of marriage, my wife has asked for practically nothing, and she's as anti-materialistic as you can get. I was just myself and somehow lucked out in finding a girl who was looking for that. I won't lie, I had some depressing encounters with women prior to meeting my wife. Never had a real date even until her. When I was 17, I had a girl walk into a restaurant, see me, and leave. I asked out a classmate in college and she said the dreaded, haha, ew, no. Plenty of stories. It was sad. Man, always hearing stories about people seeing someone and then just leaving is always sad to hear. This is for Gen Z and millennials. How hard is it for you to buy a home? The only way I can afford a home at this point is if I buy raw land, harvest and process the trees on it, and build it myself. This is a dream for some people, but in the UK, land is expensive, and we have to buy/import most of our wood because wood foraging is illegal without a license, because of course it is. I can afford the month-to-month mortgage. I cannot, however, afford a down payment. My parents' house's mortgage is like half of the rent in my area. I can afford that, and probably most of the utilities and such by myself. That being said, the price of the house has almost tripled in value since they bought it. I could probably swing the down payment by myself, but it would definitely make me uncomfortable. I honestly feel like I need to get married just to get a house. Here's a detailed example. Wife and I bought our house in 1998 when our first child was born. The house sold for $105,000, and we put $10,000 down. We hadn't done anything major to the home, and we cleaned it up in 2007 to secure a refinance to a lower interest rate and get cash to top off a remodel. Appraisal was $180,000. That's value growth fueled fully by the loss of so many independent home builders after the market crash. We brought the kitchen and bathrooms up to modern standards, stone countertops, new cabinets and fixtures, refurbished the wooden floors, added a door off the dining room and a large deck. We got the house appraised in 2021 for $290,000. 2 houses on our street sold for over $300,000 last year, and one of them was in rough shape. Banks here are requiring 30% down for new buyers right now. For my oldest son that is 2 years out of college, he would have to provide a down payment that is nearly as much as we bought the house for 25 years ago. For a 1,000 square foot home, let that sink in. A lot of small construction company owners, the kind that would build small homes, went out of business or retired after the housing crash, and the industry hasn't recovered. This has caused a greater impact to those needing starter homes. Lower supplies means higher prices. On top of that, renting homes is a good source of passive income, so an industry of corporations built specifically to make money off of them and has grown like fungus on a rotting log in this nation. Home values are ridiculous, down payments are ridiculous, and corporate cash offers are desirable for sellers, making the first housing purchase a nightmare for many. Man, I relate to both of these comments so much. I honestly do feel like if I'm ever going to buy a house, I'm going to need a partner to do it. On top of that, I also hate the idea of renting. I understand why people do it, but I've never liked the idea of putting money into something that I will never own. So seeing the crazy amount of money you need for a down payment is soul crushing. Millennial here. All I had to do was marry a girl, buy her a car, help her get her license back, and turn her loose on the streets to get T-boned by a DoorDash driver. That DoorDash insurance payout was $1 million. Profit. Disclaimer, as of last week, I don't live in that house anymore, but that's another story. Wow, this story was basically I made my money the old-fashioned way. I got hit by a Lexus. I prefer a realistic dream, like going to Narnia through my closet. Just be grateful that you have a closet. I'm an old millennial in a nowhere state. Buying our home was insanely easy. They were giving them away. 2 months later, the national housing market began to crash. This was in 2007. We're still here with 13 years to go. I think if we were 25 today, starting over, it would be extremely tough. Kind of the same deal for me. Bought my first in 2009 when the market as a whole was its worst and at the worst time of year for sales to begin with. January closing at the end of February. I did some work to the place and stayed there to 2005 and sold it to make a little profit. The market was probably fair at this point, as it wasn't a buyer's market, but it wasn't a seller's market either. Then bought the house that I'm currently in, and since 2019, watched it double in value. Refinanced in 2021 at an extremely low rate. I honestly couldn't rent a decent apartment in my area right now for what my full payment is. Taxes and insurance included. Plus all utilities cost me a month, and to own a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with a yard and 2-car garage, it's messed up to think about it, but it will be paid off when I'm in my 40s to boot. But I literally can't afford to move at this point. It's sad that people who actually have houses right now can't even leave those houses if they wanted to because the market is so bad. Old millennial here. The only reason I own a house is because my mom and I went in together on a duplex. We decided that this financially made the most sense. She's getting older, so this way I can keep an eye on her too. I did the same thing with my mom back in 2010. We both have health issues that make it a good idea to have another grown-up in the house. Neither of us have a partner. It just made sense to stick together than sit miserably in each of our own tiny apartments. House is 2 floors, top floor is mine, bottom floor is hers, though we usually sit around in the downstairs living room where the computers are set up. It's crazy how many people have assumptions about people still living with their parents at a certain age, but I feel like if you have a family that you actually like, it might be the best option for some right now. I'm early career, just started really. I make $60,000 a year in Canada. I will never be able to afford a house in my lifetime just on this wage, or any wage that I'm likely to see in this field. My only chance is any inheritance I get, or shifting careers like I'm trying to do right now. It's awful and much harder than it should be, but in Edmonton you can find a decent house for about $160,000 to $190,000, which would be about $1,300 to $1,500 per month, including insurance and property tax. That's at 7.5% if you can make a 10% down payment. I know Edmonton is more affordable than other cities, but it's the only market I'm familiar with, and I think Calgary is about 5% more expensive. Just for informational purposes, I have no doubt many Canadian cities are out of reach for most everyone. In the Comox Valley, BC, where there is absolutely nothing but a dumb mountain and an army base, an old trailer in a park is now $270,000 plus. There's flippers everywhere, constantly building, and everything keeps getting more expensive here. It's hell. They don't realize that they've made it so that their kids will never be able to move out. Rooms in houses that morons who, for some reason apparently, thought housing was going to be banned or something, paid too much for their houses. Now they try to rent out single rooms here for more than a freaking Vancouver apartment, and they whine that they have to charge that because it has to be someone else's fault you bought something you can't afford. There are homeless people everywhere here. Wanna guess why? A trailer being over $270,000 sounds insane to me. It was super hard saving up. We aimed to buy a cheap place first and just get onto the ladder. At least that way we were building equity as opposed to paying rent. Average home is almost 7 figures and interest rates are approaching 8% in Canada. Unless you have a dual 6-figure income or live at home with a strong income, the odds of you affording a home near a job center is non-existent. Down payment has to be 20% for anything over $9,999. The cost of buying a home, interest and purchase price, is going up way faster than anyone can grow their actual income. We bought one in 2014 with an FHA loan. Only out-of-pocket cost was $500 for due diligence and around $2,000 for the lawyer. We've refinanced a few times and our mortgage will be about just under $1,300 later this year, when our taxes go up. Still cheaper than a 1-bedroom in a place where we won't get murdered. Not getting murdered is a huge selling point when I look for a home. I can't even rent a home. Same. I feel like I'm never going to be able to move past renting a room in a shared house. Elder millennial here. I bought in 2018. Had no cash in hand. Utilized a program from a lender for low/moderate income buyers. Not me. Or those buying in low/moderate income zones. That's me. Required only 5% down. Took a 401k loan for the down payment and closing costs. $160,000 Philly townhome. Mortgage payment even with MPI is less than the rent on my previous 2-bedroom apartment in the same neighborhood. Process was easy, but then again, I'm familiar with it working in banking for 15 plus years. I'd wager the biggest struggle of most millennials and Gen Z is the cash down for payment and closing. To that end, ask for low down payment programs from your lender and hope to God you have some of those money bag boomer relatives that can gift you some cash. Borrowed from my 401k and paid my down payment and closing about 10 years ago. At the time, my monthly was the same as rent I was paying. Today, it's much less. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. However, the 401k loan was really straightforward, and I had a good mortgage broker that helped me understanding a lot of the numbers. I had a younger millennial friend that did a first-time buyer home loan, and that seemed to work for them. I don't really like the idea of paying mortgage insurance, but they didn't have access to a loan. I got lucky with the market timing and had decent credit, and had good work history. I imagine it's a bit crazier/harder right now for people trying for the first time given the validity over the past few years. We kinda lucked into ours. We applied for a rural development loan through the USDA and qualified for $179,900 with a really good interest rate. We had to wait 6 months for it to process and couldn't find the right home in our budget. Then we stumbled upon a home that checked all of our boxes and was owned by a little old lady that just wanted to get it off her hands. Listed at $180,000, a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath on a 1/4 acre. Last I checked, it was estimated to be worth $430,000. Man, I hope one day that I'm in a position just to want to get a house off my hands. I often think I will never buy a home, and if I ever do, it won't be until I'm in my 40s or 50s. From UK here, born in '92. have a family, 2 kids, and a wife. Buying a house seems near impossible with your average income. Current money outgoing on rent/living kills any ability to save enough to get a down payment on the mortgage. I've come to accept that I'm 100% not buying a house anytime soon. It's not how it used to be. As my old man would say, life is a struggle. I always thought life was a highway. An apartment alone these days costs you no less than $1,800 a month. It's extremely difficult. Older millennial, 1983, my mom gave me a little money to make a down payment on a 430 square foot condo in SoCal for $270,000 with PMI. Her thinking was that the market was only going to go up. Of course, 2008 happened. The bottom fell out of the market and I got laid off. Somehow I managed to hold on, and after 10 years, finally had enough equity to make a little off the place. My wife and I used it to buy a much more comfortable place in PNW 5 years ago. There were some tough times for sure, but I'm lucky compared to a lot of people. We refinanced in 2020 for a super low rate. I don't know how anyone can afford a mortgage with today's rates. We've been in our house for 5.5 years. An FHA loan and 2 down payment assistance programs through the city got us into it for almost nothing out of pocket. I don't recall the exact numbers now, but we had to put down earnest money, pay inspection, and like $250 at closing. It was under $1,000 when it was all said and done. The problem was finding a house we could afford. We got lucky there, because my best friend has a friend who at the time was working for the city. After $1 million worth of grants to a developer, all he had to do was sell 1 home to a low-income family. My best friend had to make sure all his contacts knew what we were trying to do. So his best friend referred us and they sold us the house for what we could afford. It was just dumb luck, in other words. The house is still in the ghetto, but all the other houses we could afford weren't just in the worst parts of the city, but also falling down. Like for real. One of the houses we looked at was basically missing a floor in one of the rooms. So we consider it a win. I just bought a home. I needed a $50,000 down payment to do it. I won't go into details on how I got that $50,000, but I can damn sure guarantee the average millennial/Gen Z don't have $50K to drop. I'm in the process of buying a luxury cardboard box. Should only take me 45 years to pay it down, but then the sucker's all mine. It's genuinely not a realistic goal for some people who are making an average wage, and not married, or receive a down payment from a family member. It's genuinely hopeless for now, and I'm glad I'm not in the hunt. Just gotta hold out until all the boomers die off. After that, hopefully I can squeeze in somewhere. Boomers dying off isn't going to help if all their homes are swooped up by investors to turn into Airbnbs. Legislation needs to be passed to limit the amount of investment into residential properties for anything to change. This comment right here, I honestly do believe, in America at least, that laws need to be made to limit people from buying up all the property. I believe I read an article about my state that over 50% of homes bought in the last few years were from major companies to be turned into rental properties or Airbnbs. It's pretty disgusting. We bought a house priced just over $100,000 with an FHA loan. Granted, this was back in 2015 when much lower priced homes were easier to find. The total down payment was just under $4K. There were other costs as well, but probably more than $2K from what I remember. We absolutely would not be able to afford the 15 to 20% down payment at that time. No way. We had a little bit of money saved and some money gifted to us when we got married. The house was crappy, but we slowly made improvements over the years. It did end up paying off beyond our wildest dreams when we sold it in 2021 in the super crazy market, and we were able to upgrade substantially. 25-year-old here. Me and my girl live in SoCal where the prices are crazy. It might be another 3 to 5 years until we're able to buy. It's crazy that you guys actually have a trajectory at all. I'm a California native, and the housing's been unbelievable since before the whole nation got its crisis wake-up call over a year ago. I have a few friends that are native to LA and a few that moved there and left. They all say the same thing. It's expensive. My partner and I both make over 6 figures. We live in Seattle, Washington, and we had to look outside the county we both work in to find somewhere we could afford. Got 5% down payment by using our life savings and borrowing from the 401k. I still feel lucky to be an owner with a relatively good loan rate, but it sickens me to think how hard it must be for most, when for us, as a privileged couple, it felt like a risky stretch to get into a $500,000K starter home. 3-bed, 1-bath, built in 1962, with no improvements. Seattle is crazy because 10 years ago things were so cheap. People in tech only wanted to buy East Side or Seattle. Places like Renton and Baltimore were both considered poor or far. Now, these same places are 3x in price and are unaffordable, and even techies are looking farther and farther for affordable housing. I remember when old houses in Bellevue could have been had for $400,000, and Renton houses were like $200K. That was just about 10 years ago in 2013. Have you ever thought it would be cool to go to the moon and how technically it could happen, but you know in all reality you're never going to stand on the moon? It's similar to that. We bought our first house in 2016, and since then it's appreciated $200,000. If we didn't buy when we did, we would still be able to buy, but not nearly the size house we can afford today. Since my wife and I bought in 2012, our house has increased the value by 245%. The appreciation value is great, but I have no idea who could afford a house right now. My wife, 40 female, and I, 38 male, bought our first home last year. It took 20 years together of building credit, building careers, saving cash, and then borrowing $5K to round out our down payment. Oh, and we moved from central Texas to rural eastern New Mexico. Our new property is awesome though. We're thrilled. That is insane that you would have to up and leave your own state to obtain homeownership. What is even crazier is that they had to leave Texas. It only felt like a few years ago that Texas was affordable. I moved back with my grandparents, just started my career and work remote on $30K a year and should have a down payment relatively soon for anything less than $130K. I live in the Midwest and I'm looking for smaller houses that don't cost an average of $500,000. My wife and I bought our house in 2016. We live in the South and it is a 3-bedroom home for under $200K. So I know the likelihood of something like that nowadays is crazy. It wasn't too bad, saved for a year or so, and since we were first-time home buyers, there were lots of programs I qualified for that saved us money in the closing costs. The hardest part was we were moving states and didn't have jobs locked in yet, but we were able to get it pushed through. What bank approved a mortgage for a couple with no jobs? That loan officer must have been off their meds that day. You got extremely lucky on that. Very young millennial / early Gen Zer here. I got a condo for $150K in a decent location. Average per capita income is $51,000, 3% poverty rate. For some general metrics, built in 2021, it was a lot of hunting, and the house is a 2-bedroom, but everything is spacious. It's by no means a beautiful house, but it's not run down either. Down payment wasn't too bad for me. There was ways to incorporate it into the loan. I forgot what that phrase was though. I would need a bank clerk to mistakenly add at least 2, ideally 3, zeros to the end of my account total and never notice. Like ever. I tried the loan route and it wasn't impossible with what little I had. That's what the bank told me anyways. I had planned on buying a shell of a home from the Amish and building the rest myself on my parents' land, but an opportunity plopped into my lap a year ago. My house was built in the mid-late 1800s and has been abandoned for 8 to 10 years before I got there. The previous tenant was nearly 100 and couldn't make it upstairs anymore and went into assisted living. Her children are in their 70s and didn't feel like doing anything with it, so the town obtained ownership of it. It ended up selling for $20,000, and the taxes last year was like $280 for the house and an acre or so of land. I'm slowly repairing / rebuilding things every couple of months with whatever money I have saved up. I've fixed the plumbing, electrical, roof, and several other issues that have been taken care of since I started. The spring project is the root cellar and rebuilding the cellar door along with some gardening prep. I like my process, but it certainly wouldn't be for everyone. It was full of rodents, ticks, used substances, and looting debris before I got there. Luckily, the bones were in good shape besides a few things I had to replace. 3 or 4 full roll-off dumpster containers later, and it's starting to make the situation not as worse every single day. In popular areas, impossible. In the Midwest, it's not that bad. I can get a decent starter home in a decent city pretty cheap here. The only problem is, it's the Midwest. My wife and I may be able to afford a mortgage on the cheapest home we could find, but we have about $400 to $500 between the both of us right now and definitely don't have enough to make a down payment. We live paycheck to paycheck. Average houses where I live go for around $200K, so it's not completely unobtainable. I gave up on the idea of homeownership like 10 years ago. I bought a house a little over a year ago. I'm a 38-year-old millennial. My credit score was on the high side of average or the low side of good, 700-ish, which is a whole thing to get on its own, but I was lucky in a lot of ways. I was shopping for homes in the 100K range because I'm a cheapskate, but there wasn't any good ones anywhere I wanted to live, which included a lot of places, some of which were quite far apart. So I gave up and started looking for places to rent. Turns out places to rent are awfully expensive too, so I went back to the housing market with a higher budget. Found a nice nice 1920s craftsman style home that was on the market for about $165,000. Real estate agent told me to offer $10K above because the market is crazy, but I offered $5K over instead. Offer accepted, had them do the inspections, and the owners were super helpful in fixing the things the inspector cited. Went to the bank and they were real helpful until they weren't. They wouldn't accept my pay card from my work for down payment money because they just didn't vibe with that company. They wouldn't accept Credit Karma cards that I had my tax returns on. They wouldn't accept cash because maybe I was a bad evil drug dealer. My father is a family practice physician and he was able to front the money and I just ended up paying him, which I recognize to be a privilege hardly anyone has. Huge obstacle. Be forewarned, you might want to put your money in a nice boring bank well before you start buying, or the banks will invent some obstacles for you. Medical professionals of Reddit, what is the worst hookup related injury you've seen at your workplace? Exotic special ordered venomous spider placed where the sun don't shine. Guy called an ambulance cause he wasn't sure if he could put bug bite cream up there. As the packaging said, for external use only. Lost entire traverse section of necrotic bowel. They lived, but they poop in a bag now. At first I thought, how crazy do you have to be to do that? But then I instantly thought, I'm gonna be sus of people that like spiders from now on. Mini lava lamp stuck in the rectum. Power cord was sticking out like a tail. Mini lava lamp stuck in a rectum? Sounds like a Card Against Humanity's card. Did you try unplugging it and then plugging it back in? Broken pee-pee. Dude's testes were the size of grapefruits. I assumed the internal artery was pumping blood into them from somewhere. Wasn't MA then, now in med school. It was a neat injury, but nothing we could do for him at the urgent care. He needed surgery for sure. Did see a bottle stuck up in a bum x-ray as well. I'm not one to judge. Keep on freaking on. But don't put glass up your bum, please. Anyone who's had the misfortune of watching One Man, One Jar in the mid-2000s knows better. Childhood memory unlocked. Countless cases of stuff stuck you know where. Pee-pee sticks, lady toys, cucumbers, toilet bowl brushes. If it's possible to get it in there, then someone's needed it surgically removed. Toilet bowl brush was the most shocking. However, the funniest was reconstructing a giant white, oddly realistic, veiny looking pee-pee on the back table to make sure they had pulled it all out. Pro tip, if you get something stuck up there, don't make up some fantastical story about unclothed light bulb changing. We know how it got there. You know how it got there. There's no shame in liking that stuff. Just tell us your personal time went awry. It would be kind of funny if a doctor did believe those wild stories and then was like, man, I never thought that could happen. I used to work weekend night shifts. Had a young girl come in one weekend. Despite her age, she had a hip replacement and it was dislocated. ER put it back in and she went on her way. Next weekend, she's back again. Same thing. Third weekend in a row, and there she is. Finally, I ask what she's doing to dislocate her hip so much, and she says her boyfriend keeps bending her leg back too far while they hook up. I told her to try different positions. Talk about not caring about your partner's well-being. Dude stuck a pencil up his urethra. What is porous? It got stuck. For a day. He couldn't pee around it, and initially, that's what his complaint was, urinary retention. Finally, in the exam room, when the doc asked him what the freak, with the eraser sticking out of his pee-pee, the guy finally fessed up. He ended up needing surgery. He was also like 70 years old enough to know better. Damn, in his 70s and still being a freak? You go, Grandpa. Uncle-in-law, who's an anesthesiologist, had a patient come in that had poured concrete in his bum while trying to make a custom pee-pee stick. They had to chisel the concrete out of his bum. Excuse me, he did what now? Back in medical school, I was on a surgery rotation with a classmate. Our first day, we got split into groups. By chance, my first case was an appendectomy. His first case was helping deliver a jewel-encrusted pee-pee stick from the bum of a 250-pound guy. He was at the business end when it crowned and was responsible for catching as the surgeon pushed from above. Gives a new meaning to the terms pitch and catch. Worked at a physical therapy clinic for years. 78-year-old man came in with a herniated disc in his neck after satisfying his girlfriend. He was a longtime patient and friend of the therapist, so we got the whole story. Our patient, P, was old, rich, and single, and loved all the sleazy bits that came with it. One day, his 39-year-old girlfriend asked him to return the favor, so P goes to town for the first time ever at age 78. Not really knowing what he was doing, he went at her like a dog drinking water, his words. A few moments later, he felt a pop and his arm went numb. He came to us with a nearly useless left arm about 2 days later. My boss was laughing so hard during the eval that I went into the treatment room to check on him. P insisted I stay and hear the whole story. P died a couple months later from something unrelated. I miss that crusty old bastard a lot. Wait a minute, for the first time at 78, Mr. P? Come on now, don't be selfish like Mr. P, everyone. Also, he died a few months later. Anybody else kind of thinking it's a little suspicious? A janitor heated up petroleum jelly and injected it into his pee-pee with a syringe. He was trying to make it bigger. He kept adding more. Another janitor saw him and decided to do the same. So it turns out, with nowhere to go, petroleum jelly forms granulomas under the skin, which gets infected. Word was the tip of his thing and the base wouldn't work anymore, only the middle, and abscesses formed, resulting in what was described as the pee-pee looking like, and you might want to brace yourself for this, maggots had burrowed tunnels through it. Janitor 1 was hospitalized for several weeks. As for Janitor 2, he ended up with several ulcerating wounds in his pelvic region. You could stick a finger in them. They were that big. Apparently injecting your thing with petroleum jelly is fairly common. Some girls have also attempted to inject this in their chesticles to give themselves implants. It has led to deaths because bits and pieces of it can dislodge and travel to your lungs. First off, ew. Secondly, I think it's important to say that many people in the world are not happy with their bodies, so I would suggest therapy to get help with that issue. And after that, if you still want to improve your body, at least seek out a medical professional. Typically not a medical professional, but I have a friend who was a hospital pharmacist. He said a patient came in with a coffee thermos in his bum. Cap first. He got the rest of the thermos out, but the cap stayed. After a couple of days, he finally decided to go to the hospital because he couldn't get it out. The cap ended up festering bacteria, and he had to have part of his colon removed. Now the guy is in his 30s with a colostomy bag. I've seen a crystal clear imprint of a clothing iron to the bum. The thought process was something like, if candle wax equals kinky, iron equals mega kinky? I don't know. Also, a pair of junkies got wasted and shot a substance in one of the guy's members, and we had to fillet the whole thing. He was distraught about the size difference after. This is why you shouldn't do substances, kids. Makes your member smaller. I had a patient come into the ER with runs of VTAC, dangerous arrhythmia, because his boyfriend sprinkled substance powder on a pee-pee stick and used it on him. It's very absorbent up there, and suddenly your heart is crapping out at the rate of 220 beats per second. Kinda hookup related? On Andrews Air Force Base in the 1980s, a guy was caught doing bad things to a family member. As the cops arrived, he sat on the front concrete steps and hammered his junk off. My mom worked on him in the emergency room. He still ended up in jail. Well, at least he gave himself more justice than the court system would. 18-year-old kid had a cheap pee-pee stick break way up in his bum, was bleeding and needed surgery. In my state, you're not legally an adult until 19, so he had to call his mom for consent, and she demanded staying with him through his entire ER visit. If you want the details, it was probably 7 to 9 inches of plastic. Top 2 inches are what broke off. Also, yes, the medical consent rules are screwy. Applies to SA as well, unless the parent was the suspected assailant. Not my story, but my mom's. She used to work in the oncology department at her hospital a while back. One day she came home, sits me down and says, syphilis in the eye. You always make sure your partner is clean. Don't take their word for it. I don't care what you do, just syphilis in the eye. That's all I needed to hear. Labia hematoma. Couple had hookup time, then got into a fight. He kicked her in the crotch. This bursted a blood vessel in the labia, which made it swell to the size of a large pear. That crap hurts. She used many colorful words to describe what she thought of him. My friend works at an ER in a small rural area in Canada. Apparently, this young guy comes in and has a can of Axe body spray stuck up his rectum. He was extremely embarrassed, and his excuse was that he accidentally sat on it. The crazy thing about this story is that I bet if the dude farted, you probably wouldn't be able to tell if it was him or the Axe body spray. A guy came into the emergency department because his bum hurt after his boyfriend, put his whole hand up there? He had torn his bowel and had to get a colostomy. It wasn't life-ending or anything, but imagine going to the ED after hooking up and getting told that you're getting a freaking colostomy. I had a woman in her 50s that had her boyfriend do the same thing, while they had recreationally taken muscle relaxers. She apparently was really into it and wanted him to be rougher with her. Then he pulled his arm out and noticed that there was blood everywhere. He called for an ambulance and she had a significant bowel tear. She had surgery and also got a colostomy, and several complications post-op and ended up on a ventilator long-term, unable to wean. Her grown children didn't know what caused it. The boyfriend was very attentive and stayed by her side. He was very nice, and I know he had to be dealing with some guilt. Eventually, her prognosis was so poor that they withdrew life support and she died. Every time I had conversations with her boyfriend, I noticed how huge his fists and forearms were. My dark sense of humor is telling me to make a joke, but in all seriousness, people do need to be more careful with what they take/use during hookup time. Nothing worse than pee-pee sticks, lady toys, and other objects stuck where the sun don't shine. One chap did say that he likes sticking things up there, and that's fair enough, but the strange excuses are usually the most entertaining part of it. Worst genital injury was some guy who drilled his junk with the cordless drill doing DIY. Don't secure your workpiece between your knees if you want to be sure to keep both testicles, gentlemen. I was actually reading an article about kink-friendly medicine today, and how much of a shame it is that there's so much stigma. All the kinksters agree that they should be open with their doctors, but most are not, and many will use urgent cares instead of their primary care due to reporting issues of judging by their practitioners. It causes real health issues. I'm still embarrassed about having to explain to my insurance that I both ran my car off an icy road and also got flogged so hard I had to stop because my spine hurt in the same week. So I couldn't really tell which one caused my back injury. They wanted to send it to my car insurance company. Oh, and they called during work hours, of course. I would have busted out laughing if I heard my coworker telling their insurance that they got their back blown out and needed to file a claim. Infected penile implant. His member looked like a purple tall boy beer can. They had to take him to the OR, literally filleted his man parts, take out the implant, and wash it all out. Worst part is they left him open for several days. Ick. I've actually read that men that get penile implants, it's not guaranteed that your junk works after. I think I'd rather have my stuff work than it looking better. But hey, to each their own. My mother worked in the ER and told me a story about a guy who was wasted on fairy dust and couldn't get it up. His friend told him to stick a chicken bone in his pee-pee and he would be able to hook up. He shoved the chicken bone in knuckle first and it shredded the tip of his pee-pee. A coworker was getting divorced. One night, his soon-to-be ex called about something and she could tell he was having a bad day. So to cheer him up, she had told him about how while she and her new boyfriend were hooking up, he shoved a pee-pee stick up her bum and it got stuck. After failed attempts to remove it, they went to the ER and she had to get surgery. After surgery, doctor sanitized it and gave it back to her. And in case you want to know, the story didn't make him feel better. How can any sane person think telling your ex about your new partner and you hooking up would ever be a good story to tell them? Does it count if I saw it prior to the doctor? Did some AV work for a friend of mine that managed a swing club. He was hooking up with some girl on this sort of rolling gurney/bed out in the middle of the lounge area, with like 50 plus people enjoying the show. They accidentally slid off the bed and in the jumble and ensuing thump to the ground, an audible pop was heard. He fractured his member. That pop that was heard was the poor guy's junk. Almost immediately it looked like a deflated purple balloon. This was many years ago now, and you can rest assured that I never let old broken pee-pee forget. Hey, what are best friends for, right? My family is constantly in and out of the local ER. Last time I went there for a concussion, there was a man in there with his wife for heart palpitations during hookup time. He started having a slow heart attack while they were doing the deed, and they ended up admitting him. There was also a girl in there, wasted out of her mind, claiming she hooked up with multiple different guys, like 3 or 6, and had gotten pregnant from all of them. But then her friends had kidnapped her and had given her a particular brownie with stuff in it, but she didn't know what kind of stuff. And the brownie made her lose her baby, and now she was dying. According to the conversation the doctor kept having with her, she had come in 3 times in that month claiming she was pregnant and worried about her baby. Each time they tested and all the tests came back negative. She started her period and it caused her to insist that she had lost the multiple men's baby. And it was the fault of the brownie she had in San Diego 3 days ago. She started wailing when they gave her some meds to calm her down, claiming that they were killing her baby with injections, and that she would call up her friends who kidnapped her and force her to eat the deadly brownie as proof. I'm not sure what ended up happening to her and her apparent psychotic break, but I'm hoping that they got her some help because she was clearly out of it. Dentist here. In dental school, definitely saw a girl with an inflamed palate that was worried about an infection. Did some tests, nothing looked infectious. Faculty member pulls me aside and was like, yeah, that's a bruise from a certain type of action if you catch my drift. Might not be a major injury, but definitely memorable. We actually learned/saw this in oral pathology class. It can happen because of continuous trauma to the palate. Just like you get a bruise on your arm with continuous hits, even if they aren't too hard. I'd recommend swishing with a saltwater rinse a couple times a day for a few days to help with the swelling, and maybe take a break until it heals. I'm sure AV stars know all the best health tips for these types of injuries. Dissected vertebral artery from a mouth hookup, essentially a big brain hemorrhage. Did not end well either. My mom is a secretary at a hospital, so she had heard a few stories. Apparently a person had come in with a carrot stuck up their bum. Says it got stuck up there because he fell on it while they were cooking without clothes. I'd like to take this moment to thank everyone in this thread for making sure my genitalia never works again. Was working an ER rotation at a major DC hospital while getting my EMT. I wasn't around at the onset, but a gentleman came in complaining of swelling down there, and a nurse gave him a cursory look. She immediately took him into a private room, closed the door, and came over to tell us what was going on. The guy apparently liked to feel weight on his junk when he had personal time. He had put his junk through the center of a 5-pound weight plate, like you would when you do free weights. He did his business and then fell asleep. 5 hours later, he woke up swollen and unable to pull himself out of the weight. So he had somehow taken public transportation, or walked, with a 5-pound weight plate in his pants all the way to the hospital. We spent the next 30 minutes trying to reduce the swelling by putting crushed ice up against him without success. Finally, the charge nurse just called the DC Fire and EMS to get assistance with the heavy rescue squad to cut through the plate. We took the guy into the psych room, closed the door, and proceeded to cut it off. It being the weight, not his manhood. The entire time having to keep applying more ice to the plate so that it wouldn't become hot enough to cauterize his groin. The other patients really didn't appreciate hearing a buzzsaw, screaming, and seeing all of the ER staff giggling. Of course, the poor guy also had to deal with the constant stream of doctors, nurses, and techs having to go in there to check on something and see what was going on. I think this guy misunderstood how to get swole. My stepdad is an ER doctor in the only hospital in the city I was raised in. There was no place else to go when the hookup swing my idiot boyfriend hung on the drywall ceiling came crashing down and broke my tailbone. He was also there 6 months later when the same idiot boyfriend let go of my hips as I was visiting this town called Pound and was sent over the edge of a bed and headfirst into a desk. Sorry, Dad. Either this couple is really clumsy or they have an injury kink. We get inmates at my hospital because they're right down the road. They like to inflict injuries upon themselves to get out and spend a day here. The best from the inmates was a guy stuck a razor blade up his urethra, then proceeded to shove it up further with the pen. The pen put a hole in his urethra, and of course the razor shredded it. I think I'm gonna throw up after hearing that story. So I have a patient who came in due to a rash on his pee-pee. When asking about what caused the rash, he states, I had a really rough hookup. Like really rough. I just nod my head and inform the doctor. We both give each other a what the freak look, and she proceeds to speak with the patient. The patient told her the true reason why he has the rash, and it was because he dry humped his girlfriend so roughly that he basically gave himself carpet burn on his pee-pee from his pants. No one ever talks about the dangers of the dry hump. Had this poor girl come into the ER a few weeks ago. Simple hookup went wrong case, and she was basically bleeding from her hoo-ha. They think she had some weak arteries down there and one must have just ruptured. Full disclosure, this happened to me. I noticed a small amount of bleeding immediately after. Later I noticed more, about the amount of menstruation. I laid a towel down and decided to go to bed. I felt a rush of fluid and made it to the bathroom before feeling faint and hitting the floor. I was able to call an ambulance from the floor. In the ambulance they said my face lips were blue from the loss of blood. One quick emergency surgery later and I was all stitched up and on my way home. Apparently I have weak arteries, which started as a small tear, broke open. So way back in medical school, all of us had to do 2 months rotation in OBGYN. This rotation was split up into a few weeks of labor ward, a couple weeks of gynecologic surgery, and a couple weeks of OBGYN ER. Our major county hospital had a small, separate ER just for pregnant women and those with purely gynecological complaints, to relieve some pressure off the medical and surgical ERs. So I'm sitting in the OBGYN ER with the residents one night, and about 2 a.m. we get an ambulance crew bringing in a youngish woman who is absolutely howling in pain, and tell me to get a quick report from the EMTs, who had already talked to both the woman and her boyfriend, who they said would not be coming to the ER because he was busy talking to the police. Per the EMTs, the woman and her boyfriend had just been at her house hooking up. They had just finished their business, and as folks are meant to do, decided to light up a certain type of pipe and share it while they were unclothed on their couch. The boyfriend apparently went out to their car to grab something and inadvertently bumped the headlight switch. This caused the lights to flash, which the woman apparently interpreted as "the cops are coming" for some reason, and shoved the lit pipe into her hoo-ha. Obviously, this was excruciatingly painful, causing her to tense up and start frailing trying to get it out, which then caused parts of it to shatter, so now she had hot broken glass in her baby maker. I don't have a hoo-ha personally, but that story made my imaginary hoo-ha hurt. I'm a firefighter / paramedic. Broken pee-pee, bent at a right angle about halfway. It's the second time he had it. His wife was on top and got carried away. It looked like they sacrificed a chicken on the bed. Not my call, but a paramedic was called to a 20-something male living in a ski resort town having groin pains. Arrived to find his pee-pee completely necrotic. His buddies had bet him that he couldn't stick it in a snowman for an hour. Perfect example of winning the battle, but losing the war. 26-year-old decided to be circumcised. His doctor told him not to hook up. He didn't listen. It peeled like a banana. Yep, that does it. I've had enough internet for the day after reading this. Men of Reddit, what would be your response to a guy who suddenly starts flirting with your girl? Had a guy buy our margaritas when my girlfriend ordered them for us at the counter. I thanked him from across the restaurant. Free margaritas taste better. My friend ordered a girl's drink at the bar once. Right after the bartender handed it to her, her boyfriend walks over. So what does my friend do? He orders a drink for the boyfriend too. 5 minutes later, I look over and all three of them are sitting next to each other, best freaking friends. I took some notes from that guy. He didn't buy her a drink expecting something from her. He just wanted to make her happy. And when he found out that she had a boyfriend, he wanted to make him happy too. And people like him because of that. I bought a birthday party, girl celebrating her 30th, and I got a nasty look from them. One of them came up to me and threw the drink in my face, saying, "We're not gonna sleep with you over a drink." Bouncer kicked them out after the bartender clarified that I didn't say a word and was being nice. Yes, Bouncer assumed I was harassing them at first. The good news is I got free drinks for the rest of the night. Am I the only one who thinks that I have a boyfriend or assuming all men want you is very childish? My wife had a guy offer to buy her drinks, and when he said that she was married, he said something to the effect of, "Then let me buy the lucky man his drink instead." Which I thought was a great way to handle it. Gets you a bar friend most of the time since the guy gets a free drink, and if he's a jealous or protective type, he will respond better because someone didn't end up buying his girl a drink. Went out with another couple, walking through the area filled with bars. We hear some guys catcalling our lady friend. Something along the lines of, "Yo, you're so hot, I would give it to you." And her boyfriend replies back, "And nothing for me?" This is the way I wish I would handle this situation, but my brain would probably be like, "What did he say? I can't hear you because it's so loud in here." I looked at the dude and said, "Sorry dude, you're not my sister's type." And then I immediately kissed my wife. We were both blonde, so people think we were related all the time. Gosh, I have to have my husband do this sometime. We used to work together and people would come in all the time asking if we were brother and sister. I'd step in and say something, not because I feel like I need to or because my wife can't handle herself, but because I know her and she likes the feeling of being looked after. I know this because she told me. That's very sweet. Just because you stand strong doesn't mean that you should always have to. It's good to know that you have backup whether it's your friends or your husband. I once let my girlfriend handle a situation like that on her own. And the thing I learned in the process is that it takes a woman a lot more work to deter an aggressive guy. As soon as I stepped in, Handsy McNoBoundaries apologized to me. Not the stranger whose butt he touched and complimented. She could absolutely handle the situation on her own, and my first impulse was not to treat her like a possession some other guy was touching. But on some levels, it does feel like I'm condoning the behavior. This is very true. I was out with my ex one night walking my dogs. My ex got sidetracked and stopped to take some photos of a lizard basking on the side of the road. Not wanting my dogs to stress or spook the lizard, I told him that I was going to keep walking ahead. He said that he would catch up with me and he was about a half a block behind me. I went around the corner and 2 men saw and started aggressively catcalling me, making comments on my skin, body, and following me. I told them to leave me alone and I wasn't interested. They didn't care and kept at it. They completely ignored my discomfort and were starting to actually frighten me. My ex came around the corner, saw the 2 guys were way too close to my personal space, and asked what was going on. They immediately apologized to him and backed off. Not the woman that they were actually harassing and scaring just seconds ago. They apologized to him. It's genuinely heartbreaking how much faster and easier it can be for a man to get another man to leave a woman alone than for the same woman to get that man to leave her alone. It's worrying to me how common that can be. It is pretty sad that women do have to deal with this type of stuff on a daily basis. Nothing. She is beautiful and I get it. When she shoots them down and they keep trying is when I step in because it's harassment at that point, and that's a problem. Exactly. I had a customer invite my wife on a helicopter ride the other day, totally trying to chat her up. When he asked what she did there, she pointed at me and said, "I'm just hanging out. I'm married to him." After that, you could see him deflate like a balloon. Nothing. My wife just says, "Shh, watch this." Ask him if he's down for a 3-way and make him uncomfortable. That seems dangerous if you're not actually down for a 3-way. Lots of dudes out there would be perfectly happy to make a wobbly H with you and your lady. Well, that's when you tell him that he goes in the middle. I have to agree with that second comment. It is definitely a dangerous game of chicken. Sharing a lady with another man isn't my cup of tea, but I know plenty of dudes that would have absolutely no problem with it. It's like free food to them. My wife is gorgeous in my eyes, but she is incredibly hard on herself. After kids, antidepressants, and being 20 years older than when we first started dating, she doesn't always see that she's the most beautiful person to me. So when someone else starts talking to her and wants to get in her pants, I just tell her I told you so. I pinch his butt and say we're down, but he bottoms, no exceptions. She's a grown-up, she can respond to his flirting herself. I don't need to jump in and do the whole back off buddy thing. My girlfriend, who is 40, is often pretty useless in handling those situations, giving out unintentional yes signals, further aggravating the situation. She's openly and immediately accepting of compliments in general, but also somewhat blind to more subtle flirtation. So someone flirting with her can take her positive response to a compliment as a green light. It's like she can't distinguish between the friendly and flirtatious "you look hot," and acts if they're all friendly compliments. If someone touches her, she can get uncomfortable and act like it's not happening, possibly post-trauma or fight or flight freeze response, which can come off as being okay with that kind of contact. Someone aggressively tries to kiss her, she'll tend to turn her face away and laugh or giggle, but that doesn't give a clear no response, so she can come off as just being coy. She's aware that she often has no sense that a situation has hookup intent or is headed in that direction if encouraged. And also talked a good bit about this with people. Usually it'll be when something happens out of nowhere. She'll talk to people about it over a week or two, trying to figure out what she missed. She'll digest their opinions and advice on what to look for and how to handle such situations in the future. But it just becomes a story that will sometimes pop up in conversation. I don't think she's improved in spotting flirtation or nipping it in the bud with a clear no sign. And her way of handling those situations for the past decade or so has been to ask people around her, including me, to watch out for her when she's in an environment where flirtation is likely. To answer the OP's question, my job is to give a clear no sign or just remove her from the situation. I'm not sure how her friends handle it because I'm not always around, but I do know of one situation where they did nothing, but I imagine it's because they thought, she's an adult, she can make her own decisions, much like what you said, and one would generally assume until they know better. So there are people who need someone to keep an eye out for them and intervene before things get aggressive, as they have on more than one occasion for my GF. This was a great follow-up comment. I sometimes get annoyed with the "she's a big girl" comments because it assumes that women can easily handle or get out of any situation that is presented in front of them. If he's not making her uncomfortable, I don't care. She's coming home with me, our dog is at home, and she really likes him. Flirt with her too. It's a competition now. I was at a house party and my girlfriend at the time was getting hit on by a couple of guys. I walked up to her like I didn't know her and told her how good looking she was and that I wanted to kiss her. I kissed her and she wrapped her arms around me. When we stopped, I told her that I would talk to her later and just walked away. As I did, the guys hitting on her just looked at me in awe. I tell him good luck and watch her roast him. My GF is a bartender, so she's witty AF. I love it when people try hitting on her and she just shoots them down hard. Pure comedic gold. I'm glad I never did that. That cruel insult when someone isn't being offensive, but is too inexperienced to have game, yet is just trying to get someone to like them, will be remembered for a lifetime. I agree with that last comment. Men who don't have game will definitely remember every rejection they get. If a guy is being a complete douche though, feel free to knock him down a peg. If I didn't trust her, she wouldn't be my girl. Some guy giving her a confidence boost is fine with me. According to my girl, I wouldn't even be aware of flirting because I can't take a hint even if it's right in front of my face. I'd probably join the chat, then casually ask my wife what time we told the kids we'd be home. This happened to me not too long ago. My wife is nice and likes to chat people up when she's drinking. Naturally, a lot of guys think that means she's into them. We were at a concert, and I guess the guy assumed that since she talked to him, that she and I were just friends. They only spoke once or twice, but she was dancing and drinking and he had just hung around. After the concert, he came up and started in. By then, I had enough of him checking her out, so I pulled the old, "let's get out of here, I'm sure the babysitter is ready to go home," and the guy just vanished like a puff of smoke. We were both wearing our wedding rings. I would enjoy the show, or possibly be busy hitting on his wife. Did I mention that we're swingers? Swingers are always out here needing to make themselves known to the world. If she's taken by another man by simply talking or flirting, is she really my girl in the first place? I might laugh if it was particularly bold or egregious right in front of my face or something, but I never intervene unless she asks me to. She's an adult and she can decide for herself if she wants to entertain a conversation. Also, selfishly, I like to see if I can get a free drink out of it if it's occurring at the bar. My best friend is naturally drop dead gorgeous. One night we went out and had quite a few drinks at a tap house nearby, and when we got back, I mentioned to her husband that literally every head in the room turned when she walked in, and that the bartender seemed to blush every time he talked to her. It was more for her benefit because she doesn't realize how beautiful she is. He got pissed, like what the freak? You marry a beautiful woman and you're mad when people notice her? Makes no sense. Shake my head. Dude missed a chance to hype up his wife. What's even worse, she felt guilty for it. He's actually a great husband and father. I honestly don't think he realizes what a jerk he is when he comes up with that stuff. Man, so many guys want to date a 10, but they don't want the attention that comes with it. My wife constantly gets hit on. I don't care if men hit on her. I trust her completely and have since the start. She has never given me a reason not to trust her. When we used to go out to bars together, she would get hit on. Guys would offer to buy her drinks. She would always tell them my drink of choice. After she got the drinks, she would thank them and walk away and hand me the drink. If people don't respect her boundaries, that's when I step in. We never really had any bad experiences with men hitting on her. Normally, once they see her with me, they basically just walk away. It depends on the situation. Most of the time, I think good luck, man. Hope she doesn't embarrass you. I know she's coming home with me at the end of the day. If the guy is obviously creepy or making her uncomfortable, I typically step in and make sure he gets the point. I'm not a small guy, so they usually get the idea. I don't really care for confrontation or violence, but with that said, I won't tolerate someone harassing my wife or making her feel uncomfortable. It gets a little awkward when you're a small guy. I'm not pint-sized, but I'm 5'7" and about 165 to 170. I'm not intimidating to most men. Had two offensive line-looking dudes catcalling my fiance in a bar a few years ago. She just ignored them for the first 2 times. Biggest issue was that they were out with her dad. I had to walk over and explain the situation to the 2 gentlemen and let them know that I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to allow it to continue. Luckily, I knew the entire staff at the bar, and the bartender came over to ask if everything was good. I told him, in pretty good Spanish, that I was fine, and if I needed help, I would let him know. I'm super white, but these 2 dudes didn't understand a word of what I said. Definitely helped that the bartender went back to the kitchen for a few minutes afterwards. Yeah, not looking intimidating can be a problem. I'm average size-wise. I was once in a club with my girlfriend, and some guys were harassing her and her friends. Now, I wasn't really in a mood to deal with it, but when one of them tried to touch them, I immediately called them out. They were a bit buff and thought that they would win the fight. Bit of background, I've been doing martial arts since I was 4, and not some recreational stuff, but with actual fighting. I actually met my girlfriend there. I'm usually a pretty mellow guy, but that day wasn't great to begin with. She knew I wasn't in a good mood, and when she noticed, she immediately stood behind me and grabbed my pants and belt from behind. It was pretty effective. If push came to shove, she wouldn't have held me back, but I felt it and that was enough. It was a pretty big commotion, and one of them even tried to push me, but that's when security showed up and threw them out. I think if I would have been bigger, they would have just left earlier, but on the plus side, they were thrown out and couldn't continue harassing other girls. This is one of the main reasons I don't like clubs or being at bars too much. I'm not a drinker myself, so seeing a bunch of dudes being douchey or gross towards women isn't a fun time. If he isn't physically touching her, I would see what her reaction is. If she reciprocates, then I would leave because I just dodged a bullet. If she shoots him down, I make my presence known to prevent any potential negative reaction from the guy towards her. I challenge him to a unicycle cage match. Younger me would be confrontational. Mid-30s me would be curious to see how it goes, and if by some surprise she's into it, then she just revealed something about her and us that I really needed to know anyways. That is a statement to live by. Why would I have to respond to somebody flirting with my girl? I trust my girl. That's why she's my girl. She's an adult and more than capable of handling this sort of situation. Now, if it became too much or he was stalking or abusive or anything over the top, then you have to be dealt with. But if there's just some guy flirting with my woman, great. It validates that I'm with a very attractive, interesting woman that other people find the same. She's a big girl and I trust her. I hope you know what you're getting into, my guy. I'm telling you as a friendly warning. I dated a Marine. I was a Navy corpsman. While she liked knowing I had her back, she also liked standing up and showing guys how tall she really was without heels. Did I mention that she was a Marine? I gotta admit, seeing 3/4 of the men brush off the warning from a short Asian guy, only to find out my warning was valid, their eyes went from her bust to her overtowering them. Oh, by the way, she's 6 foot. I forgot to mention that. I didn't have to worry about her being taken. She had a thing for short Asian men. 3/4 of the men that hit on her were all macho white men. So she got off on showing them her true height. Then she would walk over to me, wrap her arms around me, evidently marking her territory, like a dragon claiming her prince, with a dangerous look in her eye. That got me off. Hey now, it's fun climbing trees. I just keep a close eye on the situation. My wife can be really nervous, but also a bit fiery, and if I see her starting to get uncomfortable or the guy becoming too much, then I'll step in. Other than that, I don't mind. It just proves what I already know. My wife is a beautiful woman. I like to sit back and enjoy the show. My wife is completely oblivious to this stuff, and then later is mortified when I point out that she was totally being flirted with. It's always a good time. I've seen a few guys try it and just feel bad for them. She generally shoves her huge ring in their face and yells at them. Once we were out with some friends and some guy tried to grab her waist. She yelled and slapped his drink right into his face. Most guys would get worked up and defend their girl. I just find it a blast to watch her go off on creepy dudes and put them in their place. She's the best and I love her to freaking death. Cheers to 9 years, my love. Nothing. It's the highest compliment to me when guys hit on my wife at a bar. I'm a 6 and my wife is an honest 8, so it really speaks to my charm if you ask me. Bonus if her drinks are on their tab. Lady of Reddit here. My fiance is a DJ at a bar that I used to work at, so I would go and hang out with him and all my old friends that still work there. I ended up sitting by myself near his DJ set and guys would come up to my table constantly. When they would ask where my boyfriend was, I would point to my fiance and give them the bro nod. They usually got the point from there. There was this one time when I was like 7 months pregnant and sitting at the high top. This kid, couldn't have been more than 19, comes up and asks me why I'm all alone and looking so sad. First off, rude, and not a great pickup line. So I smile, stand up, and turn to the side to show him my belly and say, "I'm not alone, silly." He looks dumbfounded and walks away without another word. Good times. The "so sad" is such a bad pickup line, but I can totally see my cringe younger self saying that. If you get worried because your partner gets flirted with, then either you have trust issues or your partner's the wrong partner. Because with the right one, you just trust them. And the amount of people on social media with replies with something like, "Well, good luck with that, buddy boy. You're getting your girl stolen," is exactly the reason why you can't find a good partner. They aren't able to judge a good person, trust them, or create a healthy relationship. And sometimes stuff will happen, but why do I get the feeling if you were able to create a healthy relationship, it would happen way less? Honestly, first, I'd probably need to let her know she was being hit on. She is not good at recognizing when a dude is into her, by her own admission. So us being us, I would probably low-key send her this exact text. "You know that dude is trying to hit on you, right? Let's make him think we're serial killers." At this point, we would start totally playing into his advances, but occasionally saying things like, "We can have guests over, right? Everything's sharpened." Or, "I can fit 15 people in my van if they're folded right and not too stiff yet." Or something like, "How long do you think you can hold your breath?" You know, like, against your will. We don't get out much. My girlfriend is a little out of my league. Not to say that I don't clean up nice, but she is a little out of my league. Apparently this was noticed by a guy at a party. He came up to my girlfriend and myself, and since my girlfriend was in the middle of a conversation, he started talking to me. Soon, when my girlfriend was finishing her conversation, he says to me without much preface, "Hey, make me look good." Now, first of all, I have no idea exactly how he expected me to make him look good, but I asked him, "For this girl? This girl right here? My girlfriend? I mean, we could try, but I don't think she'll go for you." He turned pretty red, and without saying much else, he immediately turned around and left the group. I yelled out, "Where are you going? This isn't making you look good." My girlfriend loves when I tell that story. Is the flirting in person or via text, email, or social media? If it's in person, that can be pretty hot if you work it out right. If it's the other, then you gotta trust that they will do the right thing. Nothing other than how you respond is in your control. My wife and I don't wear rings, and a few weeks ago we were at the bar and a dude came right up to her and made his move. Gotta give the guy some props, really. She flirted back, cause that's okay for us. And he figured out soon enough that this wasn't his day. But it worked out for great fantasy talk that night, so thanks, buddy. This story reminded me of that episode of that 70s show when Fez gets used by a girl at the bar for a roleplay fantasy with her husband. First, I'd turn red with anger. Then I'd slowly stew and sweat until I had a plan formed. Next, I'd down a few shots of cheap whiskey, while my girl pestered me about what the freak was wrong with me, as I made no eye contact and said nothing, slowly gathering my rage into an irresistible force of righteous indignity. I've been here before. I said it to myself, and it never ended well. Before the night was out, one of us always regretted the choices we made that day, but so far, it hadn't been me. Some might say I'd been lucky. I'd say I was just brave. The kind of brave you get when you down a few shots of cheap whiskey. Real brave. So I step up to face my nemesis like a knight of old to defend the honor of my fair maiden by proudly and loudly stating, "Hey, you got a problem with me, bro?" Happened more than once cause my wife is a looker and she's got some assets. The moment I press them, they see my cauliflower ear and totally back off. Those dudes are scum deliberately. They try to make weak dudes look like pushovers. The one time I played Punch the Face, I became the bad guy and Chad became the poor victim. Couldn't believe people got upset at me. I'd pull my pants down and do the helicopter while screaming like a deranged penguin. That'll show 'em. There's always that one guy in the group that will do the helicopter to protect his girl. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.